És hogyha vicces akarnék lenni, akkor nyilván lehetne azt mondani, hogy nincsen elég fantáziám a fikcióhoz, de hogy ha meg egy kicsit komolyabban szeretnék amögé menni, hogy miért újságíróként szeretnék történeteket elmondani vagy elmesélni, akkor az van mögötte, hogy én nagyon szeretek kérdezni, nagyon szeretem magam beleásni, bonyolultabb témákba, elvégezni ezt a kutatómunkát, vagy ezt az utánaolvasást, ami mondjuk kell egy témának a feltárásához, és aztán szeretem ezt, hogyha sikerül egy bonyolultabb sztorit mondjuk ezekkel az eszközökkel egy kicsit közérthetőbbé tenni. És valószínűleg van még más foglalkozás, ahol ennek bizonyos részeit lehet csinálni, de mondjuk az összeset egyszerre, azt újságíróként szokás.
Említetted ezt a skillsettet. Én 15 évesen éreztem azt, hogy talán van bennem valami ebből, amikor kettelésből írtam egy beszámolót, és ez megjelent a helyi napilapban, és akkor úgy éreztem, hogy megtaláltam, amivel talán foglalkozhatom, hogy szeretek játszani a szavakkal, ahogy mondod, történetet elmesélni, hatni az emberekre, imádtam a visszajelzéseket, a feedbackeket, és aztán eltelt 5 év az életemben, meg eltelt 5 év a közéletben is, és úgy érzem jelenleg, hogy talán mégsem ez az én utam, hogy talán egy sokkal nyugalmasabb pályára vágyom. Itt a média szegmenseinek valamelyikében, de talán nem az újságírásban. És hát azt várom ettől a 3 egyetemi évtől a BN, hogy talán érnek majd olyan impulzusok, amik visszafordítanak az újságíráshoz.
Érdekes, hogy ezt így említetted, mert én ugye inkább az újságírás mögöttes része vagyok, én a másik oldal vagyok inkább, és én a jövőben nagyon-nagyon szeretnék tanítani. Úgyhogy számomra azért érdekes, ugye, hogy hogyan fog alakulni a helyzet, hogy a jövő újságíróival én mit fogok tudni kezdeni, mint jövendőbeli egyetemi oktató, illetve mint kutató. Egyébként nekem Orbán Viktor beszédei a veszőparipám, ilyen nyelvészeti, kommunikációs, retorikai szempontokból, ami sokszor izgalmas, és például anyukám sokszor mondja azt, hogy biztos meg akarod ezt írni? Úgyhogy igen, nem mindegy, hogy mi ez a helyzet, amiben most vagyunk, de én még reménykedem abban, hogy tudományos téren talán maradhatok ezen a vonalon.
Dávid, te említetted, hogy tartalmi kérdésekbe is adott esetben beleszólnak ezek a felületek, szerkesztők, hogy nektek személy szerint volt ilyen tapasztalatotok? Most elsősorban nyilván azokat kérdezem, akik gyakorlott újságírók, hogy volt olyan téma, amit nem írhattatok meg?
Én a Magyar Hangnál dolgozom, ugyebár ez teljes mértékben kormánytól és minden egyéb magaslati hatalomtól független, úgyhogy ilyennel én speciál még nem találkoztam, viszont ez úgy általánosságban amúgy egy létező probléma, hogy föntről mondják. Most ha csak ránézünk mondjuk egy origóra, hogy milyen cikkek jelennek meg ott is kikírják, hát fogalmunk sincs kikírják, arra nem veszik a fáradtságot, hogy aláírják a cikkeiket, mert egyszerűen ahhoz mondjuk én sem adnám az arcomat, amik ott megjelennek, szóval meg tudom őket érteni, viszont ott speciál abszolút föntről szerveződnek a dolgok, és nem kétlem, hogy egy újságíró csak úgy kigondolja, hogy na most akkor Karácsony Gergely engedte be a törököket 1456-ba, mert ilyen embernek nem juthat eszébe, szóval...
Nekem nem volt olyan tapasztalatom, amikor ne jelenhetett volna meg valami, amit már megírtam, de még csak olyan tapasztalatom sem volt, hogy valami cikknek mondjuk az előkészületi szakaszaiban azt mondták volna nekem, hogy figyelj, ezt inkább ne erőltessük, olyankor legalábbis, amikor nem voltak mondjuk, nem tudom, releváns szakmai érvek emellett. Viszont szerintem tök fontos azt is megjegyezni, hogy amikor arról beszélünk, hogy milyen környezetben kell újságírónak, vagy milyen ma újságírónak lenni, milyen ez a környezet, ahol ma újságírók vagyunk Magyarországon, akkor nem az a legnagyobb probléma, vagy nem csak az lehet probléma, hogy felülről leszólnak, és van egy piros telefon, és azt mondják, hogy ezt vedd le a címlapról, vagy az meg sem jelenthet, vagy neki is álljon az újságíró a cikknek. Hogy szerintem az például egy tök fontos indikátor annak, hogy mondjuk hogyan lehet dolgozni, hogy hivatalos szervek, minisztériumok, mindenféle állami fenntartású szervek mennyire hajlandóak fontos közügyekben adatot szolgálni. Nekem személy szerint ebben nagyon rossz tapasztalataim vannak, és újságíróként iszonyú nehéz, amikor hetekig vársz, hiába telefonálsz, többször küldesz e-mailt, és akkor sem jön válasz, és kénytelen vagy úgy megírni a cikket, hogy erre lettem volna kíváncsi, de a cikk megjelenéséig ez a szerv nem válaszolt. Szóval én ezt szerettem volna ehhez hozzátenni, hogy vannak ennek a környezetnek, meg ezeknek a fajta nehézségeknek fokozatai, és hogy szerintem az már a legrosszabb, amikor arról van szó, hogy effektíve valami, mondjuk főleg, hogyha az újságon kívüli, vagy az újság szerkesztői struktúráján kívülről jövő beleszólás van abba, hogy mi jelenhet meg, hogy jelenhet meg. Ennél finomabb, egyszerűbb eszközök is vannak, amikkel sokszor meg kell küzdeni.
Hoztam néhány statisztikát, ami elsősorban a női újságírókról szól, de én feltételezem, hogy azért politikai pályán férfiaknak is hasonló statisztikákkal kapnak fenyegetéseket, kommenteket, fenyegető üzeneteket. Itt most azért hangsúlyozom, mert ez, amit mondok, ez női újságírókra vonatkozik, hogy minden 10. újságíró nő élt halálos fenyegetést az elmúlt években, 83%-uk személyesen kapott fenyegető üzeneteket, 90%-uk érzi úgy, hogy az elmúlt 5 évben emelkedett az online zaklatások és fenyegetések száma, és munkájuk következtében 68%-uk aggódik az online biztonságuk, 53%-uk pedig a fizikai biztonságuk miatt is. Ez az International Women's Media Foundation jelentése. És tehát, hogy itt a sokféle típusú nyomás és akadályoztatás mellett azért van egy ilyen nagyon intenzív fenyegetettség érzés is, és az lenne a kérdésem, hogy egyrészt, akik dolgoztok terepen, ezt hogyan tapasztaljátok, akik pedig tudományos vagy egyetemi körökben mozogtok, foglalkoztok ezzel, vagy kaptok esetleg egyetemen ezzel kapcsolatban bármilyen képzést, tudást, ami később hasznos lehet?
Én terepen dolgozva soha nem éreztem még azt, hogy nem vagyok biztonságban, és alapvetően mondjuk, hogyha az előző kérdést attól indítottuk, hogy szerintem mi az, ami már a nagyon rossz forgatókönyv, akkor itt nyilván meg kell jegyezni, mert hogy azért nem olyan régen Magyarországtól nem olyan messze is öltek meg újságírót a szakmája és a munkája miatt, tehát hogy nyilván van ilyen jellegű, vagy felmerülhet az, hogy van ilyen jellegű veszély. Én soha nem féltettem mondjuk a testépségemet, meg az életemet, csak azért, mert újságíró vagyok, de ez megint csak nagyon hasonlít az előző válaszomhoz, hogy ez nyilván egy nagyon alacsony léc, hogyha ebből a fajta extremitásból indulunk ki. Mivel női újságírókra vonatkozó statisztikákat emeltél ki, itt meg arra szeretnék egy kicsit reflektálni, hogy szerintem vannak fenyegetettségek, vagy vannak kitettségek, amik az újságíró szakmával járnak, meg vannak rendszer szintű problémák, ami mondjuk a nőknek a helyzetével függ össze Magyarországon, és kétségtelen, hogy ezek össze tudnak érni, és össze is érnek a tapasztalataim szerint. Tehát, hogy csak hogy egy érthető példát mondjak, valószínűleg minden kollégám kap, nem tudom, fenyegető, meg gyalázkodó e-maileket, viszont van abban egy széttartás, hogyha mondjuk ez a kollégám nő, vagy mondjuk a saját magamnak címzett ilyen jellegű üzenetekről, kommentekről beszélek, akkor egy másfajta beszédmódot, regisztert, másfajta fenyegetést vetnek fel, mint egy férfinak. De hogy összességében szerintem ezek a problémák, szóval, hogy addig, amíg mondjuk rendszer szintűen nem változik az, hogy hogyan állunk a nőkhez, addig igazából ilyen, nem tudom, tűzoltás jellegű dolgokat lehet mondjuk azzal, hogy konkrétan újságíró nőknek a helyzetét hogyan javítsuk. Az egy másik kérdés, hogy hogyan lehet egyébként az újságíró szakmának a, nem tudom, renoméját, meg az újságírókhoz való viszonyulásnak egy ilyen normalizáltabb verzióját létrehozni, ezt nem tudom.
Amit te is említettél amúgy, hogy ez a szakmával gyakorlatilag vele jár, én is ezt tudnám igazából mondani. Olyan területen dolgozunk, és olyan cikkeket írunk, és olyan képek jelennek meg ezekben a cikkekben, ami nem biztos, hogy mindenki, mivel nem biztos, hogy mindenki egyetért, nem biztos, hogy mindenkinek tetszik. Arról nem is beszélve, hogy szerintem az emberek jóval nyíltabbak az interneten, hogy így fogalmazzak, és bármit sokkal erőteljesebben kimernek fejezni, akár egy üzenetben, kommentben, stb., mint mondjuk személyesen. Jó, természetesen terepen is előfordul nyilván, hogy rögdösnek fotózás közben, vagy stb., de szerintem interneten az emberek tényleg sokkal nyíltabban fejezik ki magukat, és sokkal gátlástalanabbak is pont emiatt. Úgyhogy igen, ez szerintem a szakmával egy vele járó probléma, és meg kell szokni. Mert az emberek nem valószínűsítem, hogy így nagy társadalmi viszonylatban változni fognak az elkövetkezendő, 10 évben.
Én csak szeretném hangsúlyozni, hogy én nem vagyok abban biztos, hogy ezt meg kell szokni, vagy hogy ez az út, hogy mondjuk azt az újságíróknak, hogy ezt szokják meg. Nem tudom, hogy lehet megoldani, ezt is mondtam már, de csak ezt így szerettem volna hangsúlyozni, hogy igen, valószínűleg egyelőre azt tudja az ember csinálni, hogy mondjuk saját megküzdési mechanizmusokat alakít ki ezeket.
Hogy tudtok valakihez fordulni, szakmai közösség, mentor, az a gondolkodás, amit a Flóra is javasolt, azt, hogy látjátok, elindult ezzel kapcsolatban, vagy tényleg egyéni alkat kérdése az, hogy ki hogyan küzd meg vele?
Nekem tök nagy szerencsém van, mert én egy olyan szerkesztőségben dolgozom, ahol eleve sokan vagyunk, és az is egy csomó erőt tud adni. Másrészt az, hogy sokan vagyunk, ez azt is jelenti, hogy sokféle korosztályú ember van, tehát hogy a pályánknak különböző szakaszain vagyunk, és nyilván azt nem olyan nehéz valószínűleg belátni, hogy ha az embernek vannak tapasztalt kollégái, én egy gyakornoki programban kerültem még annak idején az Indexben, ami az előző munkahelyem volt, szóval, hogyha az embernek van mondjuk egy dedikált mentora, az tök sokat segít, az is nagyon sokat segített, hogy nekem nem csak mentorom volt Jobb Sándor személyében, hanem Munk Veronika így a gyakornoki programunkat összefogta, és alapvetően voltak olyan feletteseim, szerkesztőim, akikkel nem csak az, hogy én oda tudtam menni, hanem mondjuk saját maguknak eszükbe jutott, amikor, mit tudom én, ilyen joginak látszó fenyegetéseket kaptam, tehát meg kellett eleve beszélnem mondjuk egy felettesemmel, akkor maguktól reflektáltak nem csak ennek a szakmai, hanem a személyes oldalára is. Ez tök jó volt, és akkor ehhez még hozzátenném azt, hogy ahogy mondtam, egy gyakornoki programban kezdtem, és a gyakornoki programban velem együtt azt hiszem 8 ember, bár nem vagyok jó a számokkal, úgyhogy lehet, hogy elszámoltam. De szóval, hogy egy ilyen kicsi társaságban tökéletesen egyszerre kezdtünk el, és nagyon sokszor nagyon hasonló jellegű, mondjuk szakmai nehézségekbe ütközünk, és ez azért jó, mert nem csak arra van lehetőségünk, hogy tapasztaltabb kollégáknak a segítségével dolgozunk fel dolgokat, hanem arra is van lehetőségünk, hogy egymás között kvázi a saját szintünkön dolgozzuk fel, és azt tudom, hogy ez nagyon ritka, vagy én legalábbis nem ismerek olyan kollégámat, aki egyébként máshol hasonló méretű gyakornoki programban kezdett volna.
Ezzel amúgy egyet tudok érteni, a szerkesztőség nagyon sok mindenben tud segíteni, főleg ugye a fiatalabbaknak, akik még ugye ismeretlenebbek ezen a pályán, és nyilván itt jön jól az, hogy vannak sokkal tapasztaltabb, korosabb újságírók, akiktől tudsz szakmai tanácsot is kérni. Velem is, amikor például Boszniában voltam, és menekülttáborokat jártunk arra én gyakorlatilag ott tanultam meg, hogy hogyan érdemes, mik azok az etikai határok, és ebben nekem nagyon sokat segítettek az ott lévő, már nem tudom, évtizedes tapasztalattal rendelkező újságírók.
Tehát amikor 15 éve én elkezdtem az egyetemet, akkor nagyon más volt a médiapiaci helyzet is, jóval kiegyensúlyozottabb, és arra lennék kíváncsi, hogy a mostani egyetemi oktatás mennyiben reflektál erre a helyzetre, és hogyan készíti fel a hallgatókat, mennyire tud egyetemi szinten ez a helyzet leképeződni, valós hasznosítható tudássegítséget nyújtani.
Én az elmúlt 2 hónapomban azt tapasztaltam, hogy egy nézőpont, látókör szélesítést kapok én itt, rengetegféle emberrel beszélgethetek, rengetegféle véleményt hallgathatok meg, és bátorítanak arra, hogy megtanuljuk kifejezni önmagunkat, hogy megtanuljuk képviselni a gondolatainkat. Egy abszolút nyitott szemlélettel találkoztam, és nagyon jól esik ebben a körben mozogni.
Megint csak egy ilyen tudományosabb oldalt tudnék behozni így az újságíró nőkkel kapcsolatban. Nemrég csináltam én is egy ilyen kis minikutatást, ami Vasvárinak egy kutatásából indult ki, mert ő azt figyelte meg, hogy az újságíró nő vagy riporter nő szó akkor fordul elő, hogyha ez az adott újságírónak a halálával vagy a szexualitásával kapcsolatos. És én csináltam egy nagyon érdekes ilyen kisebb korpuszú kutatást, amiben ez abszolút bebizonyosodott. Az Index, az Origo és a 24 pontot, tehát a 3 legalvasottabb magyar hírportált vizsgáltam, és hát nagyon-nagyon-nagyon nagy százalékban kötődött inkább az újságíró nőnek, ha jól emlékszem, 67%-ban kötődött a halálához, az újságírónak viszont csak 19%, illetve hogy az újságírók munkájáról, tehát hogy egy újságíró, amit dolgozik, és nőként, amit dolgozik, az is valami elképesztően nagy különbségbe jött ki, tehát ilyen 2% volt a nőknél, ami a munkáról szólt, minden más a férfiak oldalára jött ki. Úgyhogy igenis számít, ezek szerint még mindig értéke van annak, hogyha egy újságíró nő. És ez egy rendszer szintű probléma, mint ahogy te is mondtad, Flóra.
Igen, mindeközben meg ugye az egyetemen már, amikor én kezdtem, akkor is nem tudom, 70%-ban a lányok jártak, nem tudom most milyen arányok vannak
továbbra is
a médiaszakokra. De hogy valahogy azért a közéleti újságírás, közéleti gazdasági újságírás az látványosan mégsem veszi fel azt a lány mennyiséget, amennyit az egyetem kiképez, nem? Azt jól gondolom? Vagy
szerintem igen. A hölgyek szerintem nem feltétlenül ezen a pályán helyezkednek el mindig. Én ezt úgy vettem észre. Nem tudom, hát nálunk is java részében a média szakon jóval több a lány szerintem, egy ilyen 60-40%-ban biztos lehet, hogy 70-30. De ők kevésbé fognak szerintem ezen a pályán elhelyezkedni. Azt meg nem tudom mondani, hogy miért, de...
És hova mennek? A PR, marketing?
Igen, azt gondolom, hogy PR marketing, vagy rendezvényszervezés, és szerintem azért, mert ahogy én is érzem, lelkileg, egzisztenciálisan, lelkiismeretileg, én nem biztos, hogy ki szeretném magam ennek tenni a jövőben, és nem csak önmagam, hanem a családomat sem.
Nem mint annak a feszültségnek,
abszolút, igen,
ezzel jár.
Igen.
Nem gondolom úgy, hogy a járványi helyzet miatt sokat változtak volna a médiafogyasztási szokások, inkább csak úgy mondanám, hogy felerősödtek az álhírek, és sokkal egyszerűbben is terjednek ugye most az álhírek az interneten keresztül, hogy én is bármikor kiírhatnám Facebookra, hogy én lettem a miniszterelnök, aztán lehet, hogy nem igaz, de hát ezt majd az emberek eldöntik. Viszont tényleg ez alapvetően egy globális probléma, hogy nagyon sok fake news terjed az interneten is, és amúgy anuálisan is szerintem. Ugyanígy a koronavírusról is rengeteg ilyen hoax és konteó elmélet létezik, és ez igencsak nagyban befolyásolja az embereket, főleg szerintem azokat, akikhez kevesebb médium jut el. Tehát, hogy például mondjuk én a magyar vidéket tudnám mondani, ahol javarészt az M1 a mindenség, és az az igaz, ami ott lemegy, de hát ettől függetlenül vannak azon kívül más médiumok is, amik meg pont az ellenkezőjét állítják annak, amit az M1 egyszer-kétszer így bejelent, meg így beszámol, és ez nem biztos, hogy, tehát az a probléma alapvetően a független médiumokkal is, hogy nem feltétlenül jutnak el olyan emberekhez, akikhez amúgy el kéne. És itt a lefedettség az egy óriási probléma, mert tényleg a független médiumokat ugye javarészt támogatni is kéne, hát magánszemélyeknek kéne támogatni legalábbis, és egyszerűen vidéken nem is ruháznak be erre olyan mértékben szerintem, mint a nagyvárosokban élők.
Igen, Flóra, mondjuk például a Telex, ez egy jó példa erre.
Nincsen nagyon hosszú tapasztalatom, de megtapasztaltam közelről azt, hogy milyen az, amikor hiába szakmailag szerintem a legjobb helyen vagyok, van egy olyan gazdasági ráhatás kívülről, gazdasági is mondjuk, ami könnyen el tudja lehetetleníteni. és nyilvánvalóan ez volt az oka annak, hogy én az előző munkahelyemet elhagytam, mert nem szerettem volna ezt megvárni. Viszont azt érzem most, hogy most egy olyan médiumnál dolgozok, ami a támogatóinak, nem csak, hogy a támogatóinak köszönhetően tud működni, hanem, hogy a támogatóinak köszönhetően jött létre ez nekem egy óriási dolog, hiszen több mint 30 000 ember kvázi a semmire, nyilván nem a semmire, mert hogy ismerték mondjuk a munkánkat, viszont úgy fektették belénk a bizalmukat pénzügyileg, hogy nem láttak még semmit az új felületből, az új tartalomból. Ez szerintem egy nagyon jó dolog, és az is látszott, hogy pont az idei nyári események kapcsán egyébként több más médium is, ami olvasói támogatókat gyűjt, az tudott sikeres kampányokat folytatni, úgyhogy szépen lassan elindult szerintem hazánkban is az, hogy egyre egyértelműbb tud lenni azoknak, akik megengedhetik maguknak, hogy fizessenek azért a tartalomért, amit online fogyasztanak. Ez ugye nem egy nagyon újszerű gondolat, hogy mondjuk egy újságcikkért, vagy az újságnak az előállításáért fizetni kell, hiszen tökre innen indultunk, csak az internetnek nagyon más volt a logikája, és szerintem ebben egy csomó minden mondjuk ilyen tágabban vett jelenség is közrejátszik. Nyilvánvalóan az, hogy ma már mondjuk, nem tudom, az ember könnyebben előfizet a Netflixre, vagy a Spotify-ra, ez jobban megadja azt a szemléletmódot, ami számol azzal, hogy azok a dolgok, amik mondjuk nem csak szórakoztatnak, de adott esetben például a tájékozódásomat is segítik, vagy ahonnan én informálódni szeretnék, azokért lehet, hogy fizetni kell, és szerintem az rossz, hogy ehhez mondjuk ilyen időnként, nem tudom, drámai dolgoknak kell történnie, szóval, hogy sok olyan visszajelzést kaptam személyesen én is, hogy úristen, mit fogok most olvasni, és hogy nem vagyok benne biztos, hogy minden esetben meg kéne várnunk addig, amíg tényleg ilyen húsba vágó tapasztalat lesz, nem csak újságíróként, hanem mondjuk olvasóként, vagy médiafogyasztóként az, hogy valamit konkrétan úgy érzem, hogy elvesznek tőlem, amit addig természetesnek vettem, és addig nem fizettem érte.
Covid és a médiafogyasztási szokások megváltozása ott kapcsolódik össze szerintem, hogy ugye a legtöbb cég, főleg turisztikával foglalkozó cég, stb. A marketing költségeit vágta meg azonnal, miután bevétele nem származott ugye március óta, és ezért a médiapiacnak ez a jelenlegi konstrukciója, mi szerint hirdetőkre alapozva szed bevételeket, hogy ingyen elérhetőek legyenek a cikkeik. Tehát nagyon sok ilyen alapon, piaci alapon működő felület, ezért esett el rengeteg bevételtől, és ezért benyomásom szerint, vagy véleményem szerint egyre többen próbálnak közösségi finanszírozásra átállni, hogy az ember ahogyan ugye Netflixet, Spotify-t hasonló applikációkat a telefonján otthonról, a kanapéjéből elér és fizet érte, ugyanígy tekintsen a hírfogyasztásra is, erre gondoltam.
Szerintem ez nem a Covid miatt lett alapjába véve, ez már mint ez a közönségfinanszírozás, ez már jóval előtte elindult, és ez ugye az USA-ban sokkal jobban is működik szerintem, mint de itt a társadalomnak azt meg kell szoknia, hogyha független híreket akar, akkor előbb vagy utóbb muszáj lesz fizetni érte, mert másképp egyszerűen nem lesznek függetlenek a médiumok. Viszont itt tenném hozzá amúgy, hogy a hirdetési piacot említetted, hogy hát például én határozottan úgy tudom, hogy a Magyar Hangnál például szerintem 95%-ban az előfizetésekből tartják fel magukat, és én a Telexről is ugyanígy gondolom, hogy javarészt a közösségi finanszírozásból, és nem pedig a hirdetésekből jön a cégnek a bevétele. És szerintem ez nem is feltétlenül probléma. Nagyon sok olyan lap van, például most említem a Népszavát, ahol például konkrétan az állami hirdetésekből tartják föl magukat, tehát őnekik gyakorlatilag ez egy lélegeztetőgép, hogy az állam még hirdet bennük. Ugyanezt tudom mondani a jelenlegi Magyar Nemzetről is, hogy javarészt állami vagy államközeli cégek hirdetnek bennük.
Én azt nem tudom, hogy ki miből tartja fenn magát, én nem értek ennyire a gazdasági részéhez, viszont hajlanék arra, hogy kapcsolódjak ahhoz a gondolathoz, hogy szerintem sem a koronavírus az, ami a legnagyobb fenyegetettségnek teszi ki piaci oldalról, még a jelen helyzetben sem a magyar újságokat, meg médiumokat.
Szerintem itt bennünk vagy hát bennünk talán már nem mi az a generáció vagyunk, de az idősebb generációkban szerintem még nagyon él az, hogy ami az interneten van, az ingyen van. És emiatt szerintem nehéz azt elérni, viszonylag nehéz, hogy támogassák ezeket az újságokat, ezeket az oldalakat, de szerintem is egyébként azzal, amit mondtatok, hogy ez egyre jobban vetkőzik le magukról az emberek, és hogyha független hírt akarnak olvasni, akkor ezzel sajnos fizetni kell. Szerintem ez az a legnagyobb baj, hogy fact-checkelni nagyon időigényes. És sokaknak, akik csak el akarnak olvasni egy cikket, vagy csak pörgetik a Facebookjukat a saját kis véleménybuborékukba zárva, azoknak lehet, hogy ingerenciája sem, de ideje és energiája biztosan nincs minden egyes cikket és minden egyes hírt megnézni, hogy ez valóban valid dolgot állít-e. Egyébként erre nagyon-nagyon jó weboldalak meg applikációk is vannak. Például van olyan, ahol képek hamisságát lehet megnézni, hogyha beírod az időpontot, akkor kimutatja, hogy a földrajzi tengely szerint hol állt a nap, és hogy készülhetett valójában akkor az a fotó, vagy például olyan, ami helyszínek méretét tudja meghatározni, és mondjuk megjelenik egy cikk, hogy Orbán Viktor beszédet tartott az Erzsébet téren, és ott voltak 1 millióan, akkor te be tudod írni, hogyha négyzetméterenként 3 ember áll az Erzsébet téren, akkor is maximum mondjuk 10 000 ember fér be. És nagyon-nagyon sok ilyen van, és ezeket mind lehetne használni, csak hát borzasztóan idő és energiaigényes, úgyhogy szerintem ez a fake newsnak a legnagyobb problémája, hogy ezt csekkolni, hogy igaz-e, az borzasztó sokáig tartana, illetve az is nagyon érdekes szerintem, hogy például a Twitter hozott le egy ilyen statisztikát, hogy az álhírek százalékokkal sokkal-sokkal gyorsabban terjednek, mint az igaz hírek, és hogy nem tudom őszintén szólva, hogy hogyan lehetne ezt a tendenciát megállítani.
Mondjam? Abszolút egyetértek amúgy ezzel a fact-check dologgal. Hát az emberek, hogy mondjam, egyszerűbben és könnyebben elhiszik pont azért az álhíreket, ténylegesen, mert jóval egyszerűbbek, le vannak egyszerűsítve a végletekig mindenkinek, hogy mindenki nagyon is jól meg tudja érteni. Arról nem is beszélve, hogyha például én folyamatosan csak azt követem az Origon, hogy mondjuk a vadhajtásokat, akkor csak és kizárólag nekem olyan témákat fog bedobálni, amiben a vadhajtások is érintett. Tehát, hogyha én ott már elhatározom, hogy Karácsony Gergely alkalmatlan, és mit tudom én, nem követem be még emellett mondjuk a telexet, akkor fixen csak azt fogom látni éjjel-nappal, hogy Karácsony Gergely alkalmatlan és alkalmatlan. És ebben a közösségi médiának igencsak nagy szerepe van, hogy az ilyen álhírek hogy terjednek. És pont ezért mindig amúgy elő is jön, hát például ugye a Mi Hazánknak azt tiltották le, azt hiszem nem régiben a Facebookját, és hogy nyilván azért, mert hogy ütköznek azok a dolgok a közösségi irányelveivel a Facebooknak, amiket a Mi Hazánk megjelentett. De ez szerintem igenis fontos, és a közösségi médiáknak ezt ugyanígy, mint a Twitter is, hogy csinálja, hogy még Trumpnál is számon tartja, hogy mi az, ami fake newsnak minősül. És tényleg, és egyszerűen muszáj, hogy ezt a közösségi médiák is meglépjék, mert másképp az emberek nem tudnak normálisan tájékozódni és dönteni arról, hogy most egy hír igaz-e vagy nem.
Twitteren például már nem tudsz továbbosztani úgy cikket, ha nem nyitottad meg. Ami egy tök nagy lépés szerintem. Ettől függetlenül nyilván.
Egy lépés a pozitív irányba, és szükség is van ilyenekre.
Szerintem a magyar társadalom alapvetően nem fogyasztja tudatosan a médiát, és tök jó lehetőségeket említettél te is, de hogy szerintem az emberek nagy többsége nem ismeri ezeket a lehetőségeket. Nem az, hogy ideje nincs rá, egyébként tudja, hogy van ilyen, csak nem ér rá, nem is ismerik őket.
Igen.
És például említetted régebben még a bűvös völgyet is, tehát vannak nagyon jó kezdeményezések, de akikhez el kéne jutnia, pont azokhoz nem jut el szerintem.
Nem sok mindent tudok hozzátenni ehhez a dologhoz. Nyilván tök jó lenne, hogyha lenne ilyen bölcsek-kövém, és akkor meg tudnám mondani, hogy lehet ezt a problémát megoldani. Szerintem ugye felmerültek itt az érvek között egyrészt szabályozási kérdések, másrészt meg edukáció. Mind a kettőnek azért látom a veszélyét, mert hogy a szabályozási kérdésekkel is könnyű visszaélni, és én ezért lennék nagyon óvatos ezzel kapcsolatban, hogy mit lehet mondani, vagy nem lehet, mert hogy nem érzem magam szakértőnek ahhoz, hogy ezt kellően körül tudjam beestjezni. Viszont az edukáció kapcsán én azért azt kiemelném, hogy szerintem persze az tök jó dolog, meg egy nagyon fontos cél, hogy ez megvalósuljon, viszont én azt hiszem, hogy nem lehet ennek a felelősségét kizárólag a médiafogyasztókilyen tolni, sőt, és hogy sokszor sajnos könnyebb azt mondani, hogy ó, persze, vigyük be az iskolába, csináljuk ezt, csináljuk azt, és akkor ilyen iszonyú pici pontokon, mondjuk nagyon kicsi lépésekben tudunk előre haladni, és nem mellesleg egyébként rátoljuk a felelősséget egy csomó olyan emberre, akik mondjuk a rendszer szintű oldaláról nem tehetnek ennek a dolognak.
Egyébként most az jutott még eszembe, én nem szeretem ezeket a fiatalok típusú keretezéseket, de hogy azért ez nagyon érdekelne, hogy ti a kortárs közegben hogy éritek meg ennek a szakmának a megítélését, illetve akár tehát hogy szoktunk úgy tekinteni erre a fake news gyára, mint akik ugye alapvetően az aluliskolázott, idősebb lakosságot célozzák meg, de hogy akár a fake news tekintetében hogy működnek. Fiatalok tudatosabb hírfogyasztók, a fiatalok hogy tekintenek egyébként egyáltalán manapság az újságírásra és a médiára?
Nagyon nagyok amúgy a szakadékok, de akár még egy pár éves korosztályon belül is. Tehát, hogy tényleg mondjuk, hogyha én azt mondanám, hogy az én korosztályomnak, akik mondjuk ilyen 2000 és 99 környékén születtek, mondjuk a 30%-a tényleg tudatosan fogyaszt és választ, az én szerintem már akkor sokat mondtam, szóval ez nem túl jó a helyzet a tudatos médiafogyasztással kapcsolatban, én azt kell mondjam.
Én azt tapasztalom, hogy rengeteg függ a családon, ahonnan jön az adott ember, hogy anya meg apa mit mond otthon.
Meg hogy ők mit olvasnak, ez is nagyon függ amúgy, de ugyanez igaz akár a szavazatokra is, tehát hogy apa meg anya kire szavaz, vagy mit olvas, és ez az otthoni dolgok is ilyen szempontból nagyon is befolyásolnak, pláne egy ilyen korosztályt.
Ami szerintem viszont nagyon durva, az az, hogy még szerintem mi is benyelünk álhíreket. Tehát, hogy mi, akik tudatos médiafogyasztónak számítunk, vannak olyanok, ami egyszerűen olyan jól meg van csinálva, tehát aki már ipar szinten űzi a fake news gyártást, és nem egy clickbait valami, ami egyértelmű, hogy kamu. Én biztos vagyok benne, hogy én is olvastam már úgy álhírt, hogy elhittem. Tehát, és az a durva, hogy nem is tudom. Tehát, hogy én szerintem ez így kvázi kivéthetetlen. Akármennyire is tudatos médiafogyasztó az ember.
Illetve hát én azt tenném hozzá, hogy nem csak hírekből tájékozódunk, tehát hogy valójában van egy csomó dolog, amit mondjuk az ember hall innen-onnan, szóbeszéd, ismerősével ez történt, ő látja, hogy rendszer szinten, és hogy ez is tök fontos, hogy nyilván ez alól azért így nem tudja magát az ember kivonni, és szerintem az egy fontos ilyen, hogy mondjam, készség, hogy az ember tudjon önkritikát gyakorolni, vagy lássa azt, hogy egyébként ennek ő is kitett, és hogy nem az van, hogy valahogy felsőbbrendű mindenkihez képest, mert hogy szeretjük azt képzelni, hogy nem tudom, mi biztos nem esnénk ebbe bele.
Egy bizonyos része a fiataloknak is igencsak figyel arra, hogy mit fogyaszt, még hogyha közben nézi azokat az influencereket is, akiket ő szeret. És nem fogja feltétlenül hülyen követni az influencerének a véleményét, hogyha egyszer szembe megy a sajátjába.
De egyébként vannak nagyon értékes értékeket képviselő influencerek is, akik igenis hangsúlyt fektetnek arra, hogy edukáljanak, hogy valamiféle hasznos tartalmat készítsenek. Általában nem nekik vannak a legtöbb követőik, de hogy azt gondolom, hogy ezért van remény.
Hát én abszolút, én ezt csak nagy általánosságban gondoltam. Szóval persze, természetesen ez nem igaz mindenkire, amit így most mondtam, de én szerintem nagy átlagban azért a pénz előbb jön.
Valószínűleg igazad van egyébként, de mi például a Komlabnál csináltunk egy olyan kutatást, hogy influencerek és civil szervezetek, tehát amikor kvázi nem pénzért, hiszen egy magyar civil szervezet nem tudom, mit tud kifizetni, de biztosan nem egy több milliós követőjű influencert, és mi ezzel foglalkoztunk ott, hogy egyrészt mitől hiteles egy influencer, mi az, amit így bevállalnak, illetve hogy a civil szervezetekkel dolgoznak-e együttműködésben. Viszonylag dolgoznak, de egyébként ott is azt vettük észre, hogy azok a civil szervezetek dolgoznak influencerekkel, akiknek a vezetőik is maguk fiatalok. Például az Amigos, aki ugye nyilván egyetemistákból álló szervezet, tehát hogy ők nyilván ismerik az influencereket, de egyébként szerintem a hírműfajok kérdésére visszatérve pedig abszolút az infotainment irányba ment el szerintem az újságírás is, meg ez az egész influencer dolog, hogy már nincs tisztán hírműfaj, vagy nagyon kevés, én úgy gondolom, főleg amit a mi korosztályunk fogyaszt, mert inkább tényleg ez a szórakoztató tartalmak veszik át az uralmat.
És pont emiatt igencsak nagy a társadalmi felelősségük ezeknek az influencereknek. Pont amiatt, amit te mondasz.
És egyébként mond.
Csak még azt akartam kiemelni így a közösségi médiában, hogy én nem mernék általános véleményt alkotni egyrészt az influencer piacról sem, meg főleg nem lesújtót, de hogy a műfaji sokszínűségnek azért vannak előnyei is. Tehát, hogy az, hogy mondjuk konkrétan készülnek, nem tudom én, hírtartalmak, amik olyan platformokon jelennek meg, például a TikTokon, ami már csak a platform miatt is azzal számol, hogy egy sokkal fiatalabb közönsége van. Tehát, hogy ezekben szerintem azért van lehetőség, vannak pozitívumok is, tehát, hogy igen, lehet mérlegelni azt, hogy mit adunk föl ezért az egyik oldalon, és mit nyerünk a másik oldalon, viszont talán hajlanék én is arra, hogy ne legyen ennyire lesújtó az egésznek az ilyen képe, hogy úristen, mind meghalunk.
Igen, és egyébként hol lehet az influencereket egyáltalán ebben a klasszikus, vagy akár a mai médiapiacon elhelyezni? Tehát ők ugyanesen nem újságírók, de hát azért mégiscsak médiapiaci szereplők.
Szerintem ez abszolút egy user-generated content, tehát hogy egy felhasználó által gyártott tartalom, hogy most annak a felhasználó én vagyok-e az 500 Instagram követőmmel, vagy valamilyen nagy követői influencer, az már szerintem ilyen szempontból kvázi mindegy.
Hát én ebben nem vagyok egészen biztos, mert hogy ugye vannak most már konkrétan ügynökségek, akik influencereket futtatnak, meg hogy valójában az már megint a médiás tudatosság felé visz vissza kérdésként, hogy mondjuk médiafogyasztóként mennyire tudok különbséget tenni egy olyan Instagram fiók között, amit egy profis táb állít elő, meg egy olyan Instagram fiók között, amit mondjuk konkrétan egy személy állít elő.
De az még nem jelent minőségbeli különbséget, tehát hogy...
Egyáltalán nem azt mondom, hogy egyik jó vagy másik rossz, csak azt mondom, hogy például szerintem ez egy nagyon érdekes kérdés, hogy felhasználóként ezt hogyan érzékeli, vagy hogyan olvassa, mert hogy nyilvánvalóan a user-generated content akkor, amikor ez már inkább műfaj, mint tényleges, nem tudom, tehát hogy a vlogolás úgy néz ki ma már feltétlenül, hogy az ember egy darab webkamerába beszél, hanem mondjuk konkrét stáb veszi körül, meg nem tudom micsoda, és akkor egyébként azt is nagyon érdekes megfigyelni szerintem, hogy mondjuk a YouTube-on is egy csomó szerintem az én szememnek inkább tévés jellegű műfaj megjelenik, és egyébként mondjuk old school youtuberek ezen szoktak is panaszkodni, hogy valójában nem is így néz ki az igazi YouTube-os tartalom, meg ilyesmik, szóval, hogy igen, ezen van egy csomó kérdés. De nyilván azért is nehéz ezt átlátni, mert hogy ez tökre alakulóban van most.
Abszolút. És pont amit most te mondasz, hogy a YouTube-on milyen új tartalmak jelennek meg, nem tudom, én például a Partizán tudnám az egyik legjobb példának mondani, ami a hírszolgáltatásnak az egyik neves alakja lett, hogyha így is mondhatjuk, mivel tényleg az legátfogóbb riportanyagok gyakorlatilag most már nem a híradóban készülnek mondjuk, hanem a YouTube-on általuk.
Újságíróként van-e esetleg, vagy mit gondoltak arról, hogy másképp írnátok, vagy más témákhoz nyúlnátok, hogyha nem ez lenne a helyzet, illetve ugye te már Anna említetted, hogy azért ez elbizonytalanított téged. Ez nagyon érdekelne, hogy hogyan hat rátok ez a dolog döntésekben, témaválasztásban.
Hát ahogy említettem, engem elbizonytalanított közéleti újságírással kapcsolatban, de egy olyan területről mondjuk továbbra is szívesen írnék, ami kevésbé befolyásolt média vagy politika által.
Van ilyen?
Hát ezt a gyakorlók talán jobban tudják. Én bízom benne, hogy van ilyen. Kizárni biztos nem lehet a politikai befolyást, szerintem, de minimalizálni talán igen.
Ha jelenleg az Origónál dolgoznék, és mondjuk az is egy független médium lenne, akkor annak mondjuk itt jobban tudnék örülni. De így, hogy jelenleg is egy független médiumnál dolgozom, szerintem nem írnék másképp egy más média helyzetben. Tehát, hogy mondjam, hogyha javulna a magyarországi médiahelyzet, és mondjuk több független médium jelenne meg, akkor csak nyilvánvalóan ugyanígy dolgoznék, ahogy most. Viszont ha meg még rosszabb lenne, és talán már az összes független médium eltűnne, akkor meg nem csinálnám ezt. Nem tudom, azért a szakmához talán annyira hűnek kell lenni, hogy jól kell csinálni. És hogyha egyszerűen politika által befolyásolt, akkor én nem csinálom jól. Szerintem.
Tök nagy kérdés az, hogy mi minden befolyásolja az embernek a munkamódszerét, mert hogy nyilván vannak mondjuk nekem is ilyen elég világosan lefektetett szakmai keretek, amik között szeretnék dolgozni, és vannak olyan határok, amiken tudom, hogy nem szeretnék átlépni, de nyilván a közélet az a témaválasztásomat is befolyásolja, hogy mi az, amivel foglalkozni kell, mi az, aminek úgy érzem, hogy hírértéke van, mi az, ami fontos. Úgyhogy őszintén szólva nem tudom megmondani, hogy hogyan dolgoznék egy másabb fajta környezetben.
És mi lenne az ideális? Tudom, hogy ez is egy nagyon általánosító kérdés, de nektek lehet nagyon, nagyon elrugaszkodni is a valóságtól akár.
Hát nekem például ez a médiahelyzet, illetve ez az egész országvezetés és politikai helyzet kifagyhatatlan kutatási forrás biztosít. Szóval ilyen szempontból én, mint kutató, nem tudom, mit csinálnék egy másik helyzetben. Nyilván ideális világokban is lehet kutatni, csak kevésbé izgalmas.
Amit említettetek még nagyon az elején, hogy forrásbeli problémáitok vannak, engem ez az, ami a leginkább lelomboz talán, hogy az olyan szép hinni, hogy az újságírás arról szól, hogy én az embereket informálom, hogy értéket közvetítek, hogy átadok nekik valamit, és hogyha ezt nem tehetem tényszerűen, ha nem adhatom át a valóságot, akkor jó kérdés, hogy van-e értelme.
Jó, akkor az utolsó kérdésem az hát következik a panelünk címéből is, hogy hol látjátok, vagy hogyan látjátok magatokat 10 év múlva.
Én januárban gyakornok voltam az ország legolvasottabb újságánál, és azon izgultam, hogy a gyakornoki program végeztével engem véglegesítsenek, és állandó újságírói pozíciót kapjak. Aztán jött a koronavírus, és akkor aggódtam azon, hogy egyáltalán lesz-e még munkahelye, másoknak lesz-e munkahelye, és egyébként mondjuk közegészségügyileg hogy vagyunk. Aztán valószínűleg nyár közepén voltam az évben a leginkább lejjebb, amikor konkrétan azt se láttam, hogy lesz-e még valaha lehetőségem újságot írni, és ehhez képest most egy ilyen személyesen felévelő dologban vagyok, hogy óriási erőt ad nekem az a fajta támogatottság, ami a munkánk mögött van az olvasóink részéről. Úgyhogy ha azt nem is tudom megmondani, hogy 10 év múlva hol leszek, azt meg tudom mondani, hogy hol szeretnék lenni 10 év múlva, hogy állati jó lenne, hogyha 10 év múlva mondjuk ugyanennek a médiumnak tudnék dolgozni, aminek most is 10 év múlva is azt mondhatnám, hogy Csatári Dóra vagyok, a telex.hu újságírója, azzal már úgy meg lennék elégedve.
Én hasonlóképpen ugyanezt tudom mondani, hogy egy ilyen szakmában, ahol gyakorlatilag percenként változik a helyzet, hogy milyen médiumok szűnnek meg, mik jönnek létre, milyen jelenleg a finanszírozási helyzet. Én is azt tudom mondani, hogy én nagyon tudnék neki örülni, hogyha 10 év múlva is elmondhatnám, hogy a Magyar Hangnak dolgozom.
Én most az ELTE-n az elmúlt 2 hónapban is meghallgattam rengeteg előadót, aki mindenki bemutatkozott, mondta, hogy 5 éve van a szakmában, és ez a 24. munkahelye. Úgyhogy ebből kiindulva fogalmam sincs nekem sem, hogy hol fogom magam 10 év múlva látni. Jelenleg ezt a fél évemet is arra fordítom, hogy a médiának minél több szegmensét megismerhessem, és megtalálhassam azt, ami a legalkalmasabb számomra, hogy kifejezzem önmagam. És tehát, ahogy te is mondtad, fogalmam sincs, hogy 10 év múlva hol leszek, azt el tudom mondani, hogy hol szeretnék lenni. Egy olyan szakmában, amiben megtaláltam önmagam, és aminek a szakértője lehetek, és akár ugyanígy ülhetek 10 év múlva, de szakmai tudással a háttérben.
Hát én 10 év múlva is szeretnék a Corvinuson maradni, ami miatt egy picit aggódom, de reméljük, hogy 10 év múlva is lesz még Corvinus ebben a formában, és abban a formában, hogy ugyanez a rendkívül magas minőségű oktatás zajoljon, és ehhez szeretnék én is hozzájárulni, illetve nagyon remélem, hogy kutatóként abszolút függetlenül fogok tudni 10 év múlva dolgozni. Talán még egy kicsit több pénzért is, mint amiért most a kutatók dolgoznak, illetve hát személyes életben abszolút családtervben vagyunk, úgyhogy 10 év múlva remélem itt fogunk tartani.
És ezen a ponton át fogunk váltani videokonferenciára, ahol mi az otthonainkból jelentkezünk be, és megadjuk a lehetőséget a nézőknek, hallgatóknak, felhasználóknak, hogy feltegyék a kérdéseiket a résztvevőknek.
Uh, 27 years old, Camilla is 21, David and Anna both 20 years old. So this was the first question. There were many about independent journalism. Does it really exist? And what does it mean from your point of view? Now I will give this question to Flora, as maybe she has the biggest experience in this topic.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, that's a necessary question. I'm not sure. I mean, I get this question a lot. I got this question especially a lot during this summer, obviously, because of Index. In my case, what was important for me is the fact whether I can or can't work according to my standards, or according to my standards about professional journalism. So if I can make good work, then I'm fine. I mean, I can work. I can write. I can have an impression. I can do a lot of useful things, even though if I'm in a hard situation. But so, for example, to make it clear, if I can choose the topics that I can cover, if I can be sure that in my name only my work will appear, and if I feel comfortable writing my name on my articles, that's a big I don't know, sign of a workplace where I feel I can do journalistic work. Sorry if that doesn't make any sense. I'm not really used to speak in English about this topic, and especially not experienced to do this online. So I'm really, really nervous, as you can see.
Yeah, I think we all are a little bit beginners in this platform and in this kind of discussions. Now we had plenty questions, so I would try to pick up the most interesting ones. There is also one somebody who is interested in about the Telex current work. How does it differ from Index? But I would suggest that you will have the whole story in the next session. András Földre, the whole story. Yes, there are also question about. I read this. I would like to ask the panelists if social media have a role in the pro and versus anti-Orban polarization, and if newspaper, news organization are part of that polarization or try to build bridges and address the others. Camilla, I would give it to you if you have any research or knowledge about this.
Sorry, I understand the question really bad. I heard you really bad.
Now, is it okay if the question is that are there bridge builder platforms or in the social media or during the newspapers platforms? Or is it about the polarization in any field?
That's a hard question, to be honest. And I think social media plays a really big role in it because of the so-called filter bubble effect. That if there are some pages or some newspapers that try to play a role, you might not see it even because you see only the things you are interested in. If you see your own Facebook platform, so it's social media has a really big role in this polarization, I think.
Can I also add something to
yes,
that? I don't think that building bridges would be something that journalists should do, but I see myself as a journalist, someone who would like to cover news not for one side or another. If we are picking sides, I would like to cover news and share that with a broader audience, so everybody can get news from me.
I also would ask if David is here, because I don't see him. I don't know where. What? Sorry. Okay, then we continue without him, and let's hope that he will appear as well. There is question about how much damage has the state captured done over the last decade. In your view, would quality journalism has a much bigger potential in terms of readership if it wasn't systematically destroyed, or is it also the public used to the urbanized media system? I don't know if somebody understands the questions.
I guess I understand
then
one.
Please take the floor. And hello, David. Now you are here.
Hi.
Did you hear us before?
Yeah, I've heard you very well. The program just crashed. I don't know.
Okay, but now you're here. We are happy. Okay, then please, Flora.
So it's really hard to ask a panel this young about the last 10 years. I guess I'm the oldest one, and I only been working since 5 or 6 years, I guess. If we count everything, like all of my internships, etc. But I can quote some of my more experienced colleagues like Tamás Fabian or Veronika Munk, our editor-in-chief. They just said in an interview, I guess at the end of the summer or the beginning of this autumn, then Telex launched the crowdfunding campaign, that they see that it's harder to be a journalist right now than it was a decade ago, and I trust them. So I just wanted to give their point because they had a lot more experience than I do.
Can I also add something?
Of course.
To that part of question, which is about the leading role of media, if it wasn't crashed that hard, I think it would have a different role if the government would let it have a different role, because it depends on which kind of media system the government want to build. Like if they want the people, especially if you think about them as voters, be really, really well informed and be critical to the government, it would have been a different story. But they want to have voters and people to be a bit like more loyal, and that's why I think, in my opinion, that's why they try to build this kind of media system.
Thanks. There were also questions about self-censorship, that how you can experience it. Is that a situation that you have to think twice something before you write it down? So what's the situation about the self-censorship topic? I would give this to David because here before.
I've experienced it before, especially when I was in Bosnia, where I've seen many people in not too good conditions, under not too good conditions, and after, of course, I'm a photographer, so I've taken pictures, but I've had to select the ones which does not. Which are more fulfilled with dignity, let's say, because every people have human rights like dignity, and a lot of these people were in really harsh conditions, and I should thought about it.
Thanks. There is also a question about fake news. That can any of you cite an example where you actually believed a fake news posting and only figured it out later? Does the old-fashioned concept of common sense play any part in one's judgment of what is and isn't fake news?
I just had a really fresh experience during the US election. There is this news about Pornhub popping up on a screen of CNN, and I guess it was 24.hu, which is, in my opinion, a news site that I usually count on. And the headline was something saying that there was a viral video about Pornhub popping up on CNN during the election coverage, and I did not read the article. I just saw in my social media feed the headline, and from the headline it was not obvious that it was a fake video. Later I clicked on the news, and then I saw that it was a fake video that went viral. But I don't know, for at least a day I was in a belief that it happened. And so, yeah, common sense should have told me that it didn't, but I was relying on the site that I thought gave me the news. And maybe the headline was misleading, but in my part, obviously I didn't read the article, so that was my mistake.
Thanks. Anna, do you have any example about these questions, maybe? That you later figured out that was fake news, what you...
I think I can't really add more relevant opinions or statements.
Okay, thanks. Then the next...
Sorry, I can I also add something? I just want to say that it is really hard to know when you you were misled by something that it is actually fake news, because if you haven't got any other source and you think that you already get the right information, then how could you know? I really like Guardian's. There's a weekly something in their Insta feed, stories where they give you news from the week, and you can decide whether it was fake or it was real. And after your vote, they will tell you what actually happened, or whether it was fake or real. So that's a great and entertaining way of making you more careful with your news sources, in my opinion.
Okay, do you have an idea of what percentage of the Hungarian population gets their information from social platforms versus traditional media such as TV and newspaper and radio? Camilla, sorry, but you are the researcher.
Yes. I think it really depends on the generation. Like the older generation, for example, I don't know, 50 years old or more, I think they are more watch TV or use newspapers. The younger generation use more the social media, but it's really interesting because it's a common thinking that the younger generation don't watch TV anymore. And all of the researches, like one that Anamhaha makes and everything, it shows that we are still really watching TV, and it's some kind of fake thinking about it. So I think we still watch regular media and not just the social media, if it was an answer.
Sure. Do you know any the others more about this? No? Then we have about your secure, is it common as journalists to use secure open source tools to protect your privacy or their privacy? Where did you learn the proper use of these tools, or do you know actually them, like Tor, Tail, Signal, and GPG? I think it's also a question for the practicing journalist, so David.
Yeah, I don't really use any of these programs. I'm an open book, let's say, so everybody can write to me, I will answer. I'm not used to play with any of these programs, let's say. I will answer everyone, just text me.
But do you know these programs?
Yeah, sure. I know what they can be used for, but I didn't see why I should really use these programs right now. Maybe in the future, when I'm more of a journalist. When I'm writing, let's say, tens, hundreds of articles every week. Maybe I will offend more people, and maybe more people will write such bad texts to me. But right now, I'm not using it because I don't have a problem like this.
Mm-hmm. And Flora, do you do something for your online security or protection?
Not as much as I think I should, but in my case, I only use Signal, I guess, from the above mentioned programs. I mostly use Signal when I want to protect not myself but my sources, because I got sometimes information from people who would like to be protected with those tools. So right now, the only time when I use something, anything, mostly Signal, it is because of my sources.
Thank you. We have questions. Those working as journalists, do you see yourself as member of a different generation in terms of journalistic roles or professional habits compared to colleagues over 35 or 40? And if there is the difference, in what sense?
Dóra. Sorry, so I work as a journalist, so I can answer that, or at least I will try. Sometimes I would say yes, not really because of the work ethic, I guess. Mostly in terms how I see social media or how I see our role as journalists on social media. That can be different from my older colleagues. It is a really common discussion that we sometimes had in the newsroom, whether we should make content for another platform, because we as an online site, online journal, we can see Facebook, YouTube, whatever as competent, but in my opinion, it's not really the way that we should take. So I would argue that we should make some content, especially for platforms like Facebook or Instagram or YouTube, because we can reach our audience there as well, and people need news coverage there as well.
Thanks. David?
Yeah, I think that we have the same job, so we shouldn't have any differences on this topic. So every journalist must write art articles as the ethics says. Everyone must keep to the rules, and I think that there's no difference here. Sorry, I didn't quite hear that.
Yeah. Please mute yourself when you are not speaking then. Yes, there is a question about the cultural scene or field of journalism. We are talking very much here about news, and you were also discussing social media during the panel, but what about a more culturally oriented public sphere that takes its departure in literature, arts, films, etc., to discuss political issues or the general situation? Is that a vivid scene in today's Hungary? Maybe Anna, do you have any impression about this?
Maybe I would pass this question because there are more well-equipped or well-known participants.
Okay, thanks. Then what do you think? Maybe Camilla, do you have any
yes
impression about it?
I think it's not really a vivid scene in today's Hungary. Maybe the music or art itself has some kind of role like this, but as films or literature, it's another thing, I guess. We have some Hungarian films that are working with the current situation. For example, the FOMO, the fear of missing out movie, which was about the dangerous side of social media, but it's mostly a common issue and not just a Hungarian one. So I think to this question, the answer is mostly no.
I would argue that a bit. I think there are scenes, cultural scenes that are vivid. I'm just not sure how well known are these. I often find myself thinking about those scenes like really closed ones, really not really for a huge audience, but for some I don't know, intellectuals. So if we are speaking about how much an average Hungarian can see from their work, then yes, I think we can say that it is really hard to find those cultural scenes.
Thank you. David, do you have anything to add this question?
No, we can move on.
All right. There is an interesting question about how will the Biden administration affect the financial safety of free press in Hungary? What do you think? Let's start with Camilla again.
It's okay. That's really an interesting question, and I think this question was occurred because our government was really in a good relationship with President Trump, and maybe they feel a bit in danger now that he's not the president anymore. I don't think it would really affect the Hungarian media directly, but maybe David and Flora can tell about this more. But I think it's a really, really interesting thing that how it will be for Hungary in the international politics after that. We are not. I don't know how to say it correctly. We are not really friends with America anymore.
Flora or David, do you have any?
Unfortunately, I'm not sure if I understood the question right. Can you repeat the beginning?
Yes. How will the Biden administration affect the financial safety of free press in Hungary?
Okay, so yeah, because I was not sure it was about financial safety of free press. Hungarian free press does not have any right now, so it's already in danger. I don't think that we should expect any other country or nation to save it. So in my opinion, it would be nice if we could solve this problem for ourselves and not waiting for someone magically, I don't know, do anything that makes it better. We sometimes want to believe that someone like the EU or any other neighboring countries or the region or the US or China or Russia or whatever, someone from outside the country will save us. And I don't think that would or should happen.
Yeah, it would be really nice if the EU or the US would lend us some money for some independent media platforms, but it won't happen actually. So we have to solve this problem for ourselves, and we have to move on and let's try to do our jobs.
Yeah.
If we are speaking about how, for example, the EU can do some stuff, it's not just about money. It can also be regulations. I'm not a policymaker, so I cannot express what I would think or what could help the Hungarian media landscape or media pluralism in Hungary. But I'm pretty sure that money is not the only problem and therefore isn't the only solution that can be given.
Thanks. I think we have time for only one more question. There is a question from Turkey. Are you in contact with people from different countries who are also going through similar situations? David?
Yeah, sure. I have friends, journalist friends in Poland and in Slovakia as well, and the media landscape is pretty much, if not the same, but almost the same as in Hungary.
Flora?
I am trying to keep in touch with whomever I can. I have journalist friends from most of the neighboring countries and some from outside the EU. So I can have some info, or I can have some understanding if I need from them, but I'm not really sure if that was the question.
Can I also add something?
Sure.
As in the panel discussion, I said I work for Publito.hu, which is a Hungarian organization, but it's really international. We work in Slovakia, the Czech Republic, Poland, Hungary, and now we are trying to make it to Germany and France also. So I'm kind of seeing how the other countries trying to reach out for journalists and researchers or sources or experts to join this platform. And it's really interesting because we kind of have the same problem.
Okay, thank you very much. Now our time is over, and I really would like to thank you as our participants, Camilla, Flora, David, and Anna, for being part of this discussion, and also for our audience. Sorry for all of these technical mistakes we had here. And I also very recommend to you the next panel session, which starts at 7.
Üdvös jó estét! Én Paprika Kinga vagyok, az Eurozine főszerkesztője. Ez egy bécsi székhelyű online magazin és 90 európai lap hálózata. Az idei konferenciánkat Budapestre terveztük, és hát Budapesten is tartjuk, de erős megszorításokkal, úgyhogy most online találkozunk, amelyet a Partizánnal partnerségben tudunk megvalósítani. Itt most a beszélgetésben maszkot fogunk hordani, belátható okokból, és 2 beszélgető partnerünk online csatlakozik hozzánk. A beszélgetés angolul zajlik majd, de magyar feliratokkal, úgyhogy senki ne essen kétségbe, csak olvasson. És kíváncsiak vagyunk a kérdésekre és a kommentárokra is. Itt az élőadás alatt, illetve a Eurozine Facebook oldalán is lehet kommentelni, és ezekre reagálni fogunk egy élő videokonferenciában. Jó szórakozást!
Welcome. Thanks for taking the time and being here with us. So our conversation partners, or my conversation partners, because my colleagues couldn't come from Vienna because of the lockdown, are, let's just go in alphabetical order, I guess. Lukács Fila from Bratislava, I believe.
That's correct.
András Földes from Budapest.
Hello.
Anna Lengyel, also from Budapest.
Hi there.
And Boris Vezyak from Maribor.
Hello.
Lukács Fila is the CEO and co-founder of Jelenét, one of Slovakia's leading independent media platforms. He started as a political reporter, later becoming project manager, marketing director, and finally, deputy editor-in-chief at the daily SME. In 2014, he left SME along with nearly 50 colleagues, soon to launch Jelenét. András Földes is a journalist and videographer focusing on humanitarian and ecological issues. After working for 20 years at Index.hu, he resigned along with over 80 colleagues this summer to then become one of Telex's founding journalists. Anna Lengyel is an award-winning dramaturg and literary translator, director of Panodrama, the only documentary theater in Hungary. She has worked with Pina Bausch and Robert Wilson and remains a close collaborator of renowned Hungarian directors Árpád Schilling, Robert Alföldi and Tamás Ascher. Boris Vezyak is an associate professor of philosophy at the Faculty of Arts of the University of Maribor, Slovenia. His professional interests include the history of philosophy, discourse theory, media analysis, and the theory of argumentation.
Today, I asked you to talk with us about the professional autonomy that you maintain, or how you maintain professional autonomy, and how you see yourself as journalists, as artists, and as an academic, now grappling with pretty tight political situations. Of course, there's huge differences between the Slovakian and the Slovenian political scene, although not that big differences between the Slovenian and the Hungarian, at least in terms of, central willpower. But let's just go a quick round, and please explain to me, all of you, how you see yourself now professionally. Do you see your autonomy and your freedom to act according to your best understanding threatened in any way? And does the institution that you work with, or any institution you work with, face any kind of pressure?
To be an independent journalist in Hungary is quite a challenging task, I would say. I personally felt the pressure of the current political system when my media, called Index.hu, had been pressured into a level by different organizations and people close to the government. So it was pressured until a point that all of the journalists had left the media, because we didn't feel that we can continue to work freely under these circumstances. And we started a new media, and we are trying to be independent by a way that we get donations only from the readers. So we see this is the only option now in Hungary to maintain an independent journalistic work. So basically, I think this tells everything about how to be an independent journalist in Hungary.
Just to be very precise, the pressure you faced did not come from a direct authority, but through ownership, right? So the owner of the paper or the medium started to intervene in your operations, right?
Well, you know, the pressure is quite a tricky one in Eastern Europe, so that's why it's really difficult to explain to a Westerner, for example. So pressure is not like policemen come into the editorial room and beat us with sticks, like, you know, everyone would imagine such a pressure, or, you know, direct phones. So it's always a tricky one. Many Hungarian newspapers had been either shut down or turned to a government mouthpiece, and none of them had been witnessed any really obvious pressure. So it's always a tricky, you find yourself in a tricky construction where you just realize it's harder and harder to work freely. And it's if you're not a Hungarian, it's really hard and quite long to describe this whole structure. But basically there are personal elements of this structure. So, for example, some advisors arrive to our company and tell us how to reorganize or editorial structure to be more effective, while we were quite effective and we were the biggest media. So it was a funny thing to have advisors from smaller media to tell us how to work. And also there were pressure from economical sides, and also we had a very, well, I would say, bad contract with a media press house who sold our advertisement, and they pressured us. So there were many ways, and it's really hard to point out that who did, you know, the last step that made us leave. But if you are not really familiar with the Hungarian media landscape, it's a very interesting thing to see all of the media that has changed either or shut down or had been shut down were from the non-governmental side, and they turn to a pro-government media, or they become smaller and they try to find another way to be independent. So none of the pro-government media or right-wing media faced such pressure. So sure. From a distance, this tells, you know, the whole story.
Also, should you be interested in more details about this, and honestly, you should be, there's going to be further reads down in the description, which András recommends for those who want to get more familiar with the media situation in Hungary. Anna, please tell me about what you're facing. We are recording this part of the discussion a week in advance, and there's a bunch of new corona regulations which just came out a few hours ago, which seem to affect your work professionally, not only in terms of how theaters and artists, with performing artists, are being concerned with political pressure anyway, but it also puts you in a very uncertain situation. Can you tell us about that, please?
Well, it's a very complex situation, and I think you can draw a parallel between how this government treats the cultural players or stakeholders otherwise, and how they treat us now in the corona situation. If you look at Germany, for instance, back in March, very early on, the German government closed down the theaters for a while, but a week later, or a few days later actually, they injected a capital of 5 million euros into the cultural scene. This meant effectively that any actor or other collaborator of the Schaubühne in Berlin or the Thalia Theater in Hamburg, and I could go on, ended up getting 90% of their salaries in this whole period. And it was in the case of the Schaubühne, for instance, it was 60% from Berlin, from the Senate, and 30% from the Schaubühne. So in our country, they closed down the theaters, and we got almost nearly nothing, no financial help. There were a few very, they were like alms, then they were like really pitiful, ridiculous amounts of money you could apply for, but they were mostly ideologically founded. So you had to apply with a project about the 100th anniversary or the centennial of the Trianon decision, for instance, and stuff like that. What happened now is that while Angela Merkel, when she announced new regulations for the whole country, she made an announcement on a Thursday, and the regulations started on the Monday. Now, in this country, Viktor Orban made an announcement at 7 p.m. and regulations started at 12, so 5 hours later. And in the theater, you can only have people sitting on every third seat. If he had consulted anyone at all in our profession, then he would have found out that about 90% of theatergoers go to the theater in couples with someone that they live in the same household with. So it makes absolutely no sense. They want to sit together. If they risk going to the theater, if they wear a mask, if they do all of that, despite all of that, they end up going to the theater, and then they are told at the gate that you can't sit with your loved one who you are living with in the same flat from noon to morning till night. Then they might turn around and walk home anyway. So that's
also it's going to be even louder with the candy sackets, which they have to crunch anyway during the whole show.
No, they don't do that.
I'm just kidding.
Nah, that's
However,
really,
there's something.
But I think that's just really one thing, because I think it's important that we talk about the general situation as well briefly. In just going back to 2006, when Fidesz won the elections in the country, or the local elections, so not the national, they lost the national elections, but then came the scandal with Gyurcsány's speech, and then they won a landslide victory all over the country, even in Budapest, in most places. And in the country, they quickly replaced all theater directors in all of the state and city theaters. And with maybe 2 exceptions, they ended up being completely incompetent buffoons, or just really the cronies of the government, and they are completely incompetent. So they might sell out because they do some cheap kind of, shows and musicals and whatnot. But it has nothing to do with quality art, quality theater. And then in 2010, they won the national elections as well. And with a few exceptions, a few notable exceptions, like Katonőzsef Theatre, Örkény, and Radnóti in the capital, they also replaced the directors in the capital. And the independent scene, the independent theatre scene, which I am a representative of, I run an independent theatre, is very important in Hungary. About between 8 and 9 invitations to major international festivals come to the independent scene rather than the state or city theatre scene. And there are many players, many really well-known names, from Árpád Schilling to Kornél Mundruczó and many others, and Viktor Bodo, who keep being asked to work abroad in the best houses. But they are tricky because many, and this is, I think, relates also to what's been previously said, that many abroad think there is direct censorship. No, they are cleverer than that. So they are, since 2010, they have been trying to bleed out the independent scene. So we are getting less and less money, but they don't say, no, this show is banned or whatever. So they are trickier than that, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to survive in these situations. And then almost a year ago, last December, they tried to pass a bill that would have changed the whole structure. They would have defunded the independent scene. At least the annual funding would have ceased. And they wanted to basically just erase the major production funding body, the National Cultural Fund. And they wanted to interfere with appointing directors into theaters which are commonly owned by cities and the government or the nation or whatever. And there was a huge protest, which I was one of the main organizers of, and more than 13,000 or maybe more people showed up, and many well-known names and all of that. So it was very successful, and they withdrew 2 of their plans out of the 3, but they still now have a word in appointing directors, which ended up, so in the end, Budapest took over 3 theaters entirely, which is very problematic because now they don't have to, we have an opposition government in Budapest, led by Gergely Karácsony, the new mayor. So these theaters are safe for now, but it ended up having, there are some national theaters or theaters run or funded by the government and some by the city, and this is not how it should be. It should be a mixed funding. That's the healthy thing. That's what happens all over the world.
And also there's a culture of fragmentation.
Well, there is that as well. And then everyone knows about the theater, about the University of Theatre and Film Arts. That's the official name, where I'm both a doctoral student and a guest lecturer regularly. And as you know, we refuse to let these clowns take over.
Government-appointed
leadership,
right?
Yes, they completely restructured the whole thing. They passed a new law, which gave, this was of course funded by the government, and now it's given over to a board of trustees. And they appointed 5 men. Typically, they would never think of appointing a woman. 2 so-called theater experts, 1 so-called film expert, and 2 oil refinery experts. But we are resisting. We have resisted since the 1st of September. There is a blockade of the buildings, as you know. And I must say, this is the most uplifting experience. It's been the most uplifting experience for a long, long time. Right next to when you guys stood up and refused to be bullied.
This was 2 parallel stories. These were 2 parallel stories which have been occupying the publicity in Hungary, and I think also in the region about Hungary since at least the middle of the summer. And maybe we can look for something even more depressing when we talk about Slovenia. Or, I don't know, Boris, it's yours to judge whether you would say that the situation is any better or worse in Slovenia, which has entered a track of rapid urbanization since the beginning of the year, since Janez Janša came back to power, being openly sort of taking after the Hungarian rule. Please tell us about your situation. How do you see yourself as an academic, as a public intellectual, as a writer? What kind of pressure do you face? How do you see autonomy of opinion and publishing in Slovenia right now?
Okay, let me first present myself. I'm a modist philosopher by profession. I teach at the University of Maribor in Slovenia. So professionally speaking, I mostly do research in the field of history, philosophy. Partly I'm interested in argumentation, also in media analysis. For example, I teach several subjects on media. And what I try to do also is to be an active citizen besides my occupation. So I'm trying to be a public intellectual, as you said, and in that sense, I spontaneously became more involved in media matters in my country. More and more a sort of critical reader of Slovene journals and digital media, commenting them also on my weblog. I'm not paid, I have no sponsors and no institutional supporters. So currently I have more than 15 years of such experience, and since the beginning I have published more than, let's say, 2,000 posts or comments. What I did so far, I guess, can be described as a sort of monitoring of media developments here in Slovenia. I try to observe and comment political and economic interventions into our media landscape. Well, I mostly criticize media for being too passive and too lazy, while being subject to direct political pressure. Besides, I analyze media narratives and arguments, the ways how they approach to different topics. I blame them for losing their autonomy, and I'm certainly a very much hated person for doing that. A part of my interest is also media language analysis, including the language of hate and political propaganda, and the ways or methods how media present or even legitimize such agendas. Okay, I was asked to say something about the ways how I experience political pressure here in Slovenia, about tactics and professional standards concerning independent publishing and so on. I would say the following. A big dramatic change happened basically this year. Janez Janša, who is a Slovenian version of Viktor Orban, succeeded in becoming prime minister after winning the elections in 2018 with his party and then being unable to form the ruling coalition till March this year. So his victory in 2018 was more a result of harsh rhetoric based on xenophobia, Islamophobia, and hate speech, which was characteristic for his campaign. And as you can imagine, right-wing ruling party here in Slovenia is now using the pandemic to restrict rights and freedoms, also promoting or sparking the current weekly protest in the streets. So we are now witnessing the, let's say, introduction of legal and financial restrictions towards NGOs, also independent cultural sector and the media. And as a professor, I must mention my suspicion, namely, we all expect that the new government, which is, as I said, Orban's ally, will also try to control or, let's say, subjugate somehow our universities, following partly the Hungarian example. So far, this has not happened, so we will see what is yet to come. And that would be my introduction.
Yeah, thank you. Just to give an example for how very direct this allyship is, the very beginning of October, the Hungarian media company TV2, that's TV2 in Mire translation, acquired the third largest outlet, Planet TV, in Slovenia, and is now under the control of an organization that is a direct mouthpiece to the Hungarian government. So it seems like there's some expansion of this model here, but not only this model is expanding, there's something brighter happening in Slovakia, and it's been happening for a while. So let's ask Lukáš, first of all, whether he sees this any brighter. I mean, in comparison, it may seem rather nice. But Lukáš, would you care to tell us about Jelenét N's situation right now? An outlet that is born out of a pretty similar situation that András faced.
actually a much earlier phase of what András faced lately. And you are expanding to Czechia too.
Yes, thank you for having me. As you mentioned, I think the story of Denigen is very similar to the story of Telex, but 6 years older. The social and political situation in Slovakia is somewhat different and has been different for a number of years. So the political power is not as ideological, as strong, and as powerful in overall decision making, and it's therefore not the only problem of the media, or the pressures are split, I think, and have been for a longer period. I mean, they're split between the political pressures and the political power and the interests of the oligarchs. So we for the last over 10 years, we're seeing an increase of influence of oligarchs in the media who were not directly controlled by politicians, but which had their own interests, and again, mostly wanted to own media in order to be able to exert leverage over politicians and just defend their interests. So the situation is different in this regard. The political power, is not as heavily centralized and never was. But nonetheless, all of us were working in a newspaper which had a new 50% owner, which was one of the major oligarchic groups in the country, and we decided to leave at that point and started Denigen. From the beginning, we were building it as mainly a subscription-based medium. That means that we are also doing a print daily newspaper. We do have advertisement and all the other traditional sources of revenue, but the primary focus has always been on digital subscription. We are fortunate enough to now have over 60,000 subscribers, which is an excellent result, I think, for any market in any country, but given Slovakia's size of 5 million, I think that's really an outstanding result, and that is more than enough to be self-sufficient. Also, Slovakia, after some time of political turbulence, after the killing of a journalist, which is something that is unprecedented in the wider region, got on track to something better politically speaking. So I think now the political climate in Slovakia is okay in terms of the freedoms of speech. I think media are not facing any direct political pressure. So I would say by comparison, this situation, the political dimension has improved significantly over the last couple of years, first with presidential elections and then with parliamentary elections. And in terms of the oligarchs, I think since a lot of big scandals of the past are now being investigated, I think even the oligarchs are no longer certain of their position and their situation. So we will see how that develops, because one trend that continues to occur is that very few foreign investors are interested in investing in the media. So basically it's up to local investors, local businessmen and local journalists to own and run the media houses. And until recently, it's been mostly the oligarchs that were interested in investing, but we'll see how that develops. If there is a strong push to clear the public sphere, not in terms of politicians and judges, but also of the businessmen and the various interests that sometimes hide behind the elected officials, I think we might see an overall improvement in terms of the media landscape. But we'll see how that goes. It can turn out just the other way around. We may see that the oligarchs, in order to hold on to whatever influence they have left, will be even more tempted to enter the media landscape. So we'll see how that goes. As you mentioned, our improving situation, after roughly 2.5 years of operations, we started making a profit. And I think we were being watched by investors and journalists in the region, and we were approached by a group of Czech investors whether we would be interested in partnering and starting something similar as Deník N in the Czech Republic. In the end, it's not only similar; it's extremely close. So it has a similar or nearly identical brand. The entire concept
they have one less
is
N in their name, right?
Yes, because Deník it means daily, and you just spell it differently in Slovak and in Czech. So the one missing N that's just a matter of grammar. But it shows you how close Czech and Slovak are, and even the mentalities, I think, in many respects. So that I think that's why it works as well as it does, because we now have 100 people working in Slovakia, roughly speaking, and in the Czech Republic they have a completely separate publishing house and an editorial room of roughly 50 people. And they basically run their own show. I mean, we help them with the strategic things, and they run on our technology. But in terms of content, there is a local team that does their own thing. And even though many people were skeptical in the Czech Republic in terms of the Czechs being willing to pay for online content, luckily, it doesn't seem to be the case that there would be any sort of a problem in this regard. So they're approaching 20,000 subscribers in the Czech Republic, which is exactly on the trajectory that we projected when they started, which is now just over 2 years ago. So they're doing very well. Also, and I hope it gives some optimism on various levels that shows that you can have an independent media house which can be self-sustainable and can operate in the long run. It's not dependent on grants, on sponsorship money, and so on and so on, but is able to make its own money and thereby ensure its independence. And it shows that there are enough people that appreciate quality content and are willing to pay for it, I think, because that's what the business model is based on. It's a great business model because it not only ensures independence, but there is a great drive towards quality, because you find that the articles that people are most willing to pay for are the ones that bring the highest added value, that represent the best journalism. So I think it's one of the rare occasions where the commercial forces actually are a force for higher quality and higher public interest journalism.
That is indeed quite a peculiar part of the story, because the industry belief has, throughout commercialization of media, I would say, but especially in the past, say, 15 to 20 years, with digitization has been that it's just impossible to expect the users to pay, right? Should it be readers or viewers or whatnot? Also, people still paying for television didn't quite interfere with this idea. And yet, Deník N is considered a bit of an industry wonder, specifically because you went against this mainstream and proved this wrong, or prove something else possible on a pretty small media market. At least that's, this has been a complaint I have heard often from colleagues in Central and Eastern Europe, that our markets are too small. The state is always going to be a major player. You are never going to sustain yourself from your readers only. What do you think about this? Is this something? Is this sort of a learned attitude, or is there something to it? Would more papers, for instance, in Slovakia, be able to sustain themselves this way, or is there a limit on this?
Well, first of all, I think now you see an overall trend in people being willing to pay for online content. It's not only journalism, but it's also Netflix, Spotify, whatever. I mean, it's becoming normal again to pay for content. I think you have the old generation of people who were used to buying newspapers on the stand, so it's normal for them to be paying for content. I think you have a new generation now growing up that in the last 5 years it's become become certainly absolutely normal to be paying for movies, for music. I think illegal downloading is a phenomenon of the past. So there is just this middle generation that sort of was spoiled by the 90s, where content online was free, or it was you could have pirate versions or whatever. But I think that was sort of the exception, and now we're again coming to the normal, which has been established in the media industry for decades or for hundreds of years, when it was usual to pay your money for your newspaper. So I don't think we're going against any major trends. I think we're going perfectly in line with global trends that concern not only the media industry, but the entertainment industry in general. The question of whether people are willing to pay, I think that's something that is no longer even a valid question, I would say, in terms of the region. If you see the number of people that are paying for our content, and even for the content of some of our competitors in Slovakia, if you look at the numbers of the Czech subscribers, the numbers are growing in a very similar way as they were growing in Slovakia, despite the story being completely different, because we were being told, like, okay, well, the first problem is that the Czechs are never going to pay for content, and the other problem is that you don't have a strong story in the Czech Republic as you had in Slovakia, like of journalists standing up and revolting. And again, the Czech Republic has its many media problems, so there was a clear deeper need for an independent outlet such as ours. But yes, you did not have like this one significant event that would electrify people, and still the number of subscribers is growing pretty much the same as it was here on a somewhat larger market, but still. And again, if you look at the number of people that now supported Telex, or even supported many of the donation campaigns that were going on previously in Hungary, again, you see a big number of normal, regular people willing to pay, their few forints for supporting quality journalism. A donation is something slightly different from a subscription, but the basic principle of a mass of people realizing, okay, I have to pay or there will be no free speech in my country. I think that's the same. So I don't think you can really with a straight face say that no, people are never going to pay for content and you cannot sustain a medium. I mean, we can discuss why some of the projects maybe came too early, some of them maybe did not find the right way of the right content or the right way of approaching people. But overall, I would say it is a settled question that it can be done, and it can be done on our markets, which all have their nuances maybe, but basically are similar. The question only is how to do it, who will do it, and yes, somewhere in the future there is a question of how many similar media can survive. But I don't think you can, at this time say a definite answer, because I think people are going to be more and more accustomed to the fact that it is necessary to pay. So I think you will see a huge expansion of the total group of people that are potential customers, because whereas now it's in the tens of thousands, it's going to very soon be in the hundreds of thousands and so on. So just digital progress within our societies is going to increase the target groups massively. And with that, I think you will also have more and more room for different type of media and journalists to make money on a digital subscription.
Although I do think that there might be certain genres where the market logic doesn't apply or doesn't apply the same way. Anna, you have mentioned, which is, the recurring story in political oppression now. It's not the big black car and the red phone. It's usually bleeding out institutions or whole spheres of culture economically, which, well, in capitalism, there's tools for everyone who can afford them. What do you think would be some kind of a miracle solution, for instance, for independent theater? Let's talk about theater here, because you have pretty vast knowledge of the context and also are sustaining an institution yourself.
Well, to be honest, I must say I'm really, really pissed off at the Hungarian public in general. I mean, not the theatre-going public, but citizens. I keep saying, come on, there are no tanks on the streets. They won't imprison you if you open your mouth. Certainly, no one's going to execute you. So if you compare it to the 50s or the 60s or even the 70s, the worst thing that can happen if you open your mouth, if you're critical of this government, very critical even, is that you lose your job, that can happen, and you lose your funding, or you won't be, if you apply for a grant, you won't get it. Certainly that can happen. And I always say, I can't...
also get trolls.
Yeah, well, that's another different story. Yes, but... you know, I always say people with small children, I can't judge. I don't have small children or any children, as a matter of fact. So I refrain from passing judgment there. But people who are only responsible for themselves or their partners, you know, people, adults with university degrees, with the knowledge of at least one language or several, and I know many, 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 I really don't see the reason why they should fear, you know, why they should fear anything, the why they should fear speaking up, standing up, why they should tell me, oh, I can't open my mouth because then I'll lose my job and existentially I can't afford it. And I say, come on, you speak German, you speak English, you have 2 degrees. What the hell? Maybe you won't have a steady job with a pension in sight, which is going to be worth nothing anyway in, 20, 30 years, but you'll get jobs. This is an international market now. So you can certainly, work from Hungary to abroad. You can travel around once we have conquered COVID and it goes back to normal.
Now people are talking
about that
in Schengen, but yeah.
But I'm really, really pissed off at people who are behaving like cowards, I'm sorry to say, So there is, for instance, a depressingly huge amount of self-censorship going on. So that the government doesn't even need to censor you because you're censoring yourself before they would get there. And that really pisses me off. Sorry, this is not very, maybe it's a word that's still okay, maybe. Anyway, so in effect, one thing that I don't think we can hope for salvation from the European Union. I think there is one point that where they should be 1,000,000 times stricter, and that is when they fund EU funding going anywhere, there should be a very strict accounting for that. So if I get EU funding, and I have gotten we've been very successful sometimes with EU fundings, you cannot imagine the kind of bookkeeping that I have to do. It's like this huge Excel table with the pettiest of details of, like license plate numbers of the cars in which we traveled 50 kilometers and spent, I don't know, like 5,000 forints. So then how at the same time can it happen that they fund huge efforts of this government that have nothing to show for it? There is simply nothing there. So in that respect, I think they should be stricter. But other than that, I think we should hope for any salvation from ourselves. We should speak up. We should feel free. And I think they are, in the end, this government, Orban and company, I think they are cowards. So once there are 100,000 people on the street, because the moron is trying to tax the internet because he doesn't know what it's good for. He has only heard of, Googling and emailing, and he doesn't realize the data amount that streaming, for instance, would cause. And so he tries to introduce a special tax on the internet. And suddenly there are 100,000 people out on the streets, and right away he withdraws, So I think they are cowards. And I think if we open our mouths and we're not afraid, then it's going to be the long-term solution for everything, for freedom in the arts, freedom in the press. So we should just arise as a nation and refuse to be bullied.
So you think that confrontation pays off in the long run, and you are willing to take risks for the long run, right?
Absolutely.
Is it that, and it's more a personal impression, studying a bit of history, I always have the impression that we rise up just after the moment it goes hopeless. Of course, it's a cultural perception, and it has a lot to do with Hungarians loving to yammer about Hungarians. So, of course, I'm guilty of that too. But is it the difference of boiling point, where you reach the point when you say, it's enough and I'm not putting up with this, it's not worth putting up with this, it's not worth conforming to the circumstances? Because exactly as András also said, there's always a whole intricate machinery of interference. Is it that you take issue earlier and other people take issue later? Or do you think that a huge portion of society just doesn't take issue? Of course, we're a little bit guessing here about talking about the culture.
I think in a way, there is no sudden boiling point. So there isn't like this one thing which would really light the fuse. They're trickier than that, so they are going step by step. But on the other hand, we are living in a country of 1984, where people are, you know, what is happening in their lives very often is that they go hungry every single day. And if the school closes because of COVID, then the children don't get to eat. That even today, leading news every single time, they found, 64 migrants on the border of something like, Hungary and Serbia or whatever.
Coming back from Gasztárba.
Yeah. Funnily, they are wearing, if they provide a picture, then you can see that they are wearing summer clothes. So that's another story. But anyway, so there is this split conscience of people believing what they are being told rather than what their experiences. I don't know if there is a tipping point or a boiling point that would change that. I think people, well, in the end, it all boils down to education. So I always say, if there is one area that we should just get back from these people right away, it's public education. Because in the end, it all boils down to public education. Because if you don't learn how to read sources critically, if you don't, if you read something and you don't think of checking, okay, but what is this site? Who is writing this? Is this valid? Is this legitimate? Have you heard of it? Or is it just some, this is even with all the fake news about no virus being there and wearing a mask is a bad idea and stuff like that. So we just have to learn to read critically. We have to go to the schools. We have to, I think maybe we should find a way to become involved in public education, all of us. Informally, formally, I don't know how, but I think that's the key to our future.
Well, in a state of this level of media capture, I think you have to do critical reading with every breath, because you're actually going against everything that's coming toward you, and you have to find more credible sources for yourself. So that doesn't come on a silver platter, because it has been, there's barriers that were built up. We're talking about critical reading and we're talking about education, but I think, even when it comes to public education, we do have to talk seriously about academia and the autonomy in academia, which we see in Anna's example and in so many examples is also under serious attacks by these sort of tiny tyrants of the region and elsewhere too. How do you see these models apply to academia or to public intellectuals, Boris, both from your example or structurally? Do you think that taking a conflict early is the way to go? Does that help? Or are you maybe concerned more for preserving institutions and maintaining a culture as a silent stream? Also, do you think that there is any model that can help academia be less dependent from the state?
Okay, I would say in Slovenia, people from the university field so far are more or less keeping silent. Personally, my position, I would say, is very specific, because I was active as a, let's say, media critic even before. I was despised by many authorities here in Slovenia even before So what happens here right now is that, of course, the government is attacking these critical voices. The government is trying to compromise, to discredit personally people like me. And the question is whether to get used to it or not to get used to it. This rhetoric is really hard to stop, and such hate speech and personal attacks are becoming more and more widespread in the civic sphere. On the other hand, I would say that there are many cultural workers, intellectuals who are protesting right now in the streets, of course, because they are suffering from the shutdown of all, let's say, private venues. There is a loss of income from the, say, cinemas, from the concert halls, from the theaters. So there was a kind of corona aid for self-employed cultural workers, and now it ended. So those people who usually receive support from the state, like publishers, like cultural workers, performance, and the like, they are, of course, under increasing financial pressure. Also, I would like to add that there is a huge attack on NGOs here going on, including Peace Institute. So those people are right now protesting against this threat of eviction from the state-owned building. There is approximately 20 NGOs who were in this state building, and now they're being evicted. Of course, this building is in the center of the capital, Ljubljana, and I would say that this will hugely affect the future of NGOs and the art scene here in Slovenia. So the Slovenian government, the culture ministry, is basically owning this building. So they're justifying the need for eviction by saying they have to renovate the building. The next thing I would like to stress is also that there is a critical moment for Slovenian filmmakers also, because they are not receiving funds for various film projects here in Slovenia. So many of them are waiting for the payments for their work that was already done a year ago or something. So these projects have been stopped right now or postponed or are basically endangered. So of course, because of the COVID-19 crisis and pandemic, this field of film and cinematography here in Slovenia is getting worse and worse. And I mean, all cultural people, workers, and intellectuals who are drawing funds from the state budget are now endangered. So that's the reason why basically intellectuals and cultural workers are right now protesting in the streets. This is done weekly. I mean, every Friday there is a huge gathering in the streets of Ljubljana and other cities throughout Slovenia. There are normally several thousand people. There were 27 protests by now. So in these 7 months, that would mean that each week there is one of the protests in the streets.
There's further reading also on Slovenia, the situation in Slovenia suggested by Boris down in the description below and by all of the speakers here. Also, if you're interested how culture workers were drawn out and got
engaged in the protests in Belarus. Ingo Petz just recently published his piece in Eurozine, which you will find in headline, but also in the description. So maybe that's a sort of slower process for people to get involved and take issue than those who are quick to do it can accept or can count on. I'm also sometimes referring to myself because I first met András when I was the activist and you were looking into who's organizing protests. I do understand Anna's point because I'm a big ball of anger, so I can take issue with anything straight up and then just realize maybe it wasn't the right time. But you are not the kind of person who confronts up front, right? So you have not been involved in political activism on any sort of side. You keep yourself to this very sort of, let's say, industry standard journalism median. So how do you decide on a point when you actually take up a conflict and take issue or openly resist something? And where is the point where you say that you're just standing your ground, staying there, doing the work, and that should be enough? So what is the breaking point? How do you make a decision like that?
Well, it's very easy because I don't take this decision. I always try to be independent journalist and work as an independent journalist. That means I'm not taking sides, and I haven't been done, and none of my colleagues done it. I think that gives us the strength, what is really needed, especially in Hungary now, when government tries to push journalists and medias into one side. And so, well, it's an interesting thing. I believe Hungarian government doesn't want to have only right-wing media. It's something important for them and for their propaganda to have a very obvious opposition media that tells slogans they can fight with. So that's why our media index.hu, that doesn't really exist in its form anymore, was dangerous for the government because we kept these standards, which meant they could not push us to the box of opposition media or left liberals or whatsoever, because we criticized the previous, for example, the socialist government that was way before Fidesz. And that's why we had readers from every political side. And that was a danger for them. And our power comes from independency. So we didn't we haven't done this decision, and I try not to take this step.
Well, in a sense, you did. I mean, you did. There was a mass resignation at index.hu, and then you founded Telex. So that's a very open statement, not about a political affiliation, but about a boundary that you're not willing to cross or trespass, right?
No. It's the boundary of being independent.
Yeah, but how do you define that boundary? What is the basis of the judgment?
Yeah, well, it was also very easy to see this boundary, but it was not between being an activist or being independent. It was being not being political sides or step out of being journalist. It was we were in a situation when unknown forces try to push us into one direction, and we said no, we won't be pushed, or we don't want to be pushed in either direction. We want to be independent. And this boundary where we stood up was very easy to point out, because we had two principles for our work, and it was also published that our independency is depending on on the fact that we can produce our content or articles and videos and so on independently without any political or economical pressure. And also that the content of our stuff should not be changed without our notice and without our knowledge. And we stood up after our editor-in-chief was fired by the leader of
the initial conflict which led to this was originally that the idea was to break up the editorial staff into separate contractors, and so that the editorial staff as a unit would have not existed anymore.
Yes, but we resisted this idea. So this idea was kind of cancelled, but right after that, our editor-in-chief was fired, and we said, okay, this was the point, because we said that the stuff cannot be changed without our notice, and we didn't know anything about this step. We just realized this step, or we were informed that Szabolcs Dóra was fired, and then we said, okay, we have one choice, either or the leaders of the company have one choice to reinstate him into his position, or we leave, because this was a very strict rule for us, and they didn't want to put him back into his position. So the next day we left the company.
Sure, but in a sense, let's say that it is a bit similar to sort of waiting for an ultimate trigger. You didn't run ahead with assumptions. You waited until something so drastic was openly provable, pretty much unlike the staff of back then SME, which then founded Jelenét, who didn't wait for this direct interference. You saw the change in ownership and left immediately, Lukáš. So how is this a very different trigger? Can you imagine a situation in which you would have waited, or is it just, is it a personal choice that's different, or is it an entirely different strategy that you chose? How do you see this?
Well, first of all, it's very difficult to, reconstruct events even after 6 years, especially events concerning large groups of people. So I will try to speak mainly for myself in this. I don't remember that situation as being a clear-cut situation at all. So there was a lot of soul searching and deliberation, just on a personal level, as to how to proceed in that situation, because what I think you do have situations when the boundaries are very clear, and when they're crossed, but I think there are very many processes where the boundaries are very blurred, and sort of you just get from one degree of gray to a different one, and sometimes it's very difficult to draw the line and to say that this is for me the boundaries, and for me that situation was in that category. I mean, it was about thinking about where will this lead eventually, and is it better to act now or act later? And are these people the types of people that I want to be associated with in any way, regardless of their interference into my work or my life? So there are many arguments that came up in that deliberation, and the process now, to say not only about my decision making, but it wasn't like a group action. It was like a set of individual decisions that ended up looking from the outside as a mass sort of decision or process. And for sure there was some sort of a group dynamic going on, which I think we got to understand or partially or perceive only in retrospect. So it was the kind of thing where I told my immediate colleagues at the time I was one of the deputy editor-in-chiefs, and we sort of sat down and each of us on his own said that, okay, yeah, this is it, I'm leaving. And maybe the arguments and the ways that led us to that decision were different. Obviously, there were many different factors, but sort of there at that point there was like not even much of a debate. That was like a 2-minute thing where everybody said, in terms of the management or of the editor-in-chief and the deputies of us saying, okay, we're leaving, and we had at that point no ambition to organize any sort of mass thing. So we just told the rest of the newsroom, like, okay, this is our decision. If this goes through, we're leaving, and we wish you all the best of luck. We had, since this was even for us a tough decision to make, I think I can say for myself, I had no ambition at all to, convince anyone of that this is like the only way to go. And as was said previously, people have children, people have all sorts of commitments. So I wouldn't want to be in, and I hope I wasn't, pretending to have all the right answers or to pass any sort of moral judgments of people that decided differently in that situation. As it turned out, the biggest number of our colleagues at that point decided in the same way then. And at that point only we realized, okay, that there is some sort of a mass movement going on, and for sure we have some sort of a responsibility for what's going on. And only at that point did we start to have discussions about, okay, well, we have to, take a next step. Because if it was only like the 4 or 5 of us, I think we all would have gone in our separate directions and done our thing or something. But suddenly, I mean, the sense of responsibility for a group of 50 people that will be out of a job and that have their children and their mortgages and all of that, that sort of motivated us to come up with a plan, and we did in a very short time, and that's how Deň Again was started. So that was the process. The process, I will not pretend it was very structured or premeditated or that we knew from the beginning where all of this was heading. It was quite honestly, I think many big and small historical events work in this way of just, people making their own small decisions, and one thing leading to the other, and suddenly you have something that hopefully is making an impact in terms of at least our country and maybe even the region.
So you're saying that this wasn't sort of pre-planned strategy, but more a chain reaction, in which time and moving together had a huge factor, right? András has been really, nodding here while you were talking. I think he relates to this very closely.
Yeah, it was the same for us. So it was different on the personal level because we decided together. So there were a lot of discussion what to do now, but it was obvious that that fundamental things has changed. So boundaries has been crossed, and we have to react, and we cannot accept this anymore. So we live through those times when different types of grays appeared around us. But we have these 2 principles, and we thought if these are kept, we can work on, because then we can publish our material without any interference, and we know who we are work with. But then one of these principles have been dismissed, and then we knew that we have to do something, and then we had like really heated conversations within the editorial room that actually I was filmed, and I just watched these footages lately, and these were quite interesting times, I would say. And then we decided together that, okay, we leave, but we didn't have any plan back then what to do. So we knew only that we have to leave, we have to stop working here because we cannot work anymore here as an independent journalist, because then we have to do, you know, those little step backs that we didn't want to do. And then maybe the next day or that day, a huge demonstration was organized. We didn't organize. I'm sorry.
In your support.
Yeah, in our support, and a crowd of like 10,000 people woke up to the office of Viktor Orban, and it was a demonstration for Index. And then we felt, wow, we really have a huge support, and we should do something. And I think this was a big emotional help to step on. And then we started to think about our next step. And well, we had ideas, of course, when we left the company, that we should start something, but it was really like a science fiction. You know, in Hungary, I really agree with Anna Lengyel that Hungarians are not really, you know, revolutionary.
Hard to engage. Hard to engage.
Yeah,
I would say.
Exactly. So we didn't think much about you know, starting a new media out of scratch, but then we felt that that's something that we have a huge support, and we should start something. And then the process has started, and now
you've been running for a month now.
Yeah, we have been working for a month. One of my articles is just about to publish, so that's why I was like pushing my phone while filming, because you know, the process is going on. So it's really a positive outcome, although this is an experiment in Hungary. So we still don't know if we can operate as Jelenét, or we have to find out some other structure. And we also have a mission, you know, like Index worked as some kind of public media, because the Hungarian public media doesn't fulfill its tasks. But it's a question how we can do it if we are working, or if we will work behind paywalls. So there's a lot of question, but well, we are at a positive stage now.
Well, I think we can all acknowledge that if you have to substitute public service because the official public service doesn't do its job, it's always going to be partial, because that's a structural thing. And probably we will also at some point have to talk about what actually constitutes public service beside, you know, the given channel here and there, or whether that's a task for commercial media. You can guess my answer, but that's beside the point. So I do have to say that I'm very disappointed that Lukács says he doesn't have all the answers. He has a PhD in logic, so I would have expected something more. But even if you don't have all of the answers, I'm pretty sure you do have a bunch. So let's now switch to video conference mode, all of us, and see what questions and comments the audience has for us.
Places, and I will just start with a bunch of questions that we got mainly through the platform. The first one is directly addressed to Anna Lengyel. Oh, there's a bunch to Anna Lengyel. Irena Mariniak, our contributing editors, who is here, by the way, maybe she can ask this because I'd love to love to see you ask your question in person. Fortunately, for those who are on the platform, we can do this. So I'll leave this question for a little later and wait for Irena to come on with her video. And in the meantime, we have Gianpaolo Accardo of Vox Europe joining us. Vox Europe is a Eurozines. And since we were talking about models which are now not even that new, and in a wider perspective are not at all new, are relying on subscriptions. But there are media who are experimenting with something different. Eurozine is based on collaboration and syndication within our network of culture journals. And of course, this is both the strength and the mission of the network. Vox Europe also publishes in multiple languages, and they have introduced a new feature which I wanted Gianpaolo to just say a few words about, because apparently some people are experimenting with not a paywall for the users, but entirely the other way around. Gianpaolo, take it away, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Reka. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk here. I hope you can, because there are some funny noises in my headset. Yeah, we've been introducing, it's not really a paywall, but it's a membership, as we call it. In May, probably the worst moment to set up this kind of operation this year, but anyway, it was planned earlier and we set it up in May, along with a Steady platform, which is a German-based platform for membership and subscriptions. And we are rather happy. Now, the most difficult part for us is to fine-tune what we would like to keep for our members and what we want to keep free for our readers, and also when is the paywall lifted, after how many days. So we first decided 2, then 4, then probably a bit longer, only for exclusive content. It's all about fine-tuning, and I find very inspiring what I've been listening to now, because I have to think that if stakes are high, subscribers come in rather easily, as we saw with Jenik especially, and now I hope also with Telex. And I also see that at Eurozine you've been introduced a kind of supporting membership. I would be curious to hear how it is doing. But I'm here more to listen than to talk. But I would be happy to talk more if needed.
Sure. I don't have a lot to report on Eurozine's side. We are asking for donations from our audience, but this is not something that we so far have put a huge emphasis on. At this point, we are co-financed or mainly financed from grant projects, and some of it is public funding. So our logic here is that once we get public funding, what we do is supposed to be free. But that's a rationale that doesn't apply to everyone who is publishing. So I wouldn't, extend this over everyone. But I think we're not necessarily the most relevant player here. And you have asked a bunch of questions here, I believe. So you asked in the chat whether the speakers have the impression that their fellow colleagues, journalists, academics, and theater directors in other European countries are aware of the situation of press and culture in Hungary, Slovenia, and Slovakia, and whether they think that it would be useful if they were more vocal within their country and didn't see the abuses by the government. Or is there something more or different they could do to help, and would that even be an appropriate way? This is Gianpaolo's question to the panelists. What do you think? Do you think that your international colleagues should be more vocal? and would that help your situation? Maybe we can start with Anna and then go in an alphabetical order of names. But then it would be András first, but now I already messed this up. Let's start with Anna. I think some of the speakers are muted just to avoid noises. So I'll try to switch your mics back on. András, you are not muted as much as far as I see. Anna, can you maybe unmute yourself? Yeah, this is the part I wasn't looking for. I can't hear you, Anna. Can anybody actually hear anyone? Yeah, I can see you, Anna, but I'm not hearing you. Does anybody else hear Anna? Is it just me? No, nobody. That's not good. And we heard you just a bit ago. Okay, give me a second. I'm sorry. I'm hoping that moving on once again back to speaker might even help.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear us? Now we hear you.
Okay, well, let's hope it doesn't go away. Okay, so first I need to maybe explain that I'm sitting in a hospital. I'm getting a blood transfusion because my blood platelets are low. I have cancer and I'm waiting for my next chemo, but first I have to get bloods to be able to get it. But I'm doing fine, so no worries. But that's the reason for the weird setting. So, for theatre makers, I think we have an advantage because these are known names and it's very easy, and also they are creative people. So for instance, the university Scotters, the University of Theatre and Film Arts in Budapest, are studying all kinds of different creative professions, and the lecturers are experts in those professions. So obviously there were many very creative ideas on how to get the word out. And then of course the fact that I will just say an example, that I had worked with Kate Blanchett several times, that made it very easy to have her have our motto on her palm in no time while chairing the jury at the Venice Film Festival. So I think it's for instance, about the theatre, but mostly about the theatre school. Most European colleagues are very aware. There was a huge support. There still is huge support coming, and in fact, because this government and these arrogant new so-called bosses who we refuse to acknowledge, who we consider illegitimate, are trying to take our semester away. So they are saying now that no one will get credits for this semester, even though the studying and the teaching went on the whole time. So we are now talking about that as well with international schools, whether there is a way for them to help us in that respect. And it's very promising. So in this respect, I think theatre makers are faring fairly well.
Boris, do you have international support, or do you see institutions in Slovenia getting international support from coverage, and does that help?
Well, I would say that unfortunately I cannot see any such a support, and it would be nice to have one. All that I can say is that the situation here in Slovenia is dramatically bad and very difficult. So cultural workers are around. I think they are in a huge crisis without any financial support from the state. So they are just trying to search their ways how to survive in the marketplace. And there is really no big future in it, I would say. So what we need is basically a kind of political change, instant political change. What we need, I would say, is a sort of grassroots movement, because our opposition is obviously very, very weak. So what is going on right now is basically protests. There has been more than 400 protests in half a year so far in the Slovenian streets. So people, protesters, NGOs are very much engaged in defending human rights, in defending independent cultural production, media freedom, and of course they are targeted by the government all the time, by hostile rhetoric, by police, and so on. So no. We really need a kind of internationalization of the situation, not only here in Slovenia, of course, but also here in Slovenia. I think it's very, very difficult right now.
We cannot hear you.
We cannot, there is no sound. But we know what the question is, so who wants to go next? András, you go.
Yeah, sorry, there's a bunch of technical things. So yeah, the question obviously is probably a bit more pressing or a little bit twisted for András, because obviously there's a lot of international coverage in Hungarian media all over the place. It's sort of the yammer topic for anyone who wants to signal their liberal democratic values, and for others who genuinely worry too. Does this help, András? Does this interfere with your work? Does it have an actual effect on you? Does anybody hear András?
No.
No, we're not hearing András again. Okay. This is just so annoying. Just give me a second. Apparently, we have to do it the old Windows way. I have to move him from speaker and then back to speaker. But hopefully this should work now. András?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So, well, the international attention doesn't really help us here in Hungary, especially because Hungarian readers tend to read Hungarian newspapers. So we don't think that the international attention gives us a lot of support here in Hungary. But it might be important from government-wise that they know that there's some kind of attention on us, and they might know that they can't do anything, at least not while the spotlight is on us. And we got some advices on how from different media. From example, Jelenét helped us a lot. So I know, or the founders and the leaders of our new company Telex visited Jelenét and had a lot of thoughtful conversation with them. So we might use their experiences. But in Hungary, especially this liberal or leftist part of the society thinks that international support can help us, or the European Union, or the attention of the international community can pressure our government. But I think we had to realize that this is just a hope, and our government is not, or never been stopped by being watched by the international or European community. So it was nice to read articles on our struggle, but I don't think it gave us more than emotional support.
I see. I understand. It also corresponds to what Anna talked about in the recording, that there's no salvation coming from outside, right?
Yeah.
Lukáš, do you want to comment on coverage on Slovakia?
Well, I have several thoughts on that. I mean, firstly, luckily, we're currently in a position when the situation is not as dramatic. So I think we're all happy to let the attention be on those that need it more. My second thought would be that all of our countries have their problems, but if we look at countries such as Belarus or Russia, not to mention countries even further away, the problems get even bigger, and naturally, there are only so many topics that international attention, whatever that means, can focus on. So naturally, I think Belarus is currently the country which is getting the most attention, and probably rightly so. And then I would say our experience with international influence, I think, in Slovakia is mixed. I think there, for sure, in the 90s, when we had our biggest flirtation with autocracy, and maybe really we're not on our way to NATO and EU membership, but it seemed as though we might be going, the Ukrainian or Belarusian way. Now, I think at that point, the international pressure and also helped the country a lot. For sure, the change eventually had to be domestic and had to be done, by Slovaks, and so it couldn't be imposed on us. But I think it did help that we were not forgotten, and we were helped. Naturally, that was in a somewhat different international and geopolitical and historical context. For sure, the perspective of EU membership was something that was very highly motivational, but that can no longer be used since our countries are already members and are, contributing in our own strange ways to what the EU currently looks like. So I understand that the situation is now different, but we do have this one positive experience. But I would also mention a negative experience. I think a large portion of the Slovak media market expected that foreign media ownership would be something that in the long run would guarantee independence of the local media and media freedom. And for maybe a decade after the 90s ended and really Slovakia joined the EU and so on, that seemed to be the case. Slowly the big media all were owned by large foreign investors who really did bring their know-how and really had no local business or political interests. So really, we're creating an environment in which journalists could do their work well. But after the financial crisis hit in 2008, was it maybe? We saw a huge reversal of all that, and basically all the big foreign owners started selling, and sadly most of them sold to whoever was offering the most, which was in most instances the oligarchs and people who had other than just purely business interest in owning a media company, because at that point having a media company was not that great of a business in most instances. So at least as far as Slovakia and the Czech Republic is concerned, I think that was a moment of sort of like a sobering moment or time when people woke up a little bit to the reality that maybe even the West, as we perceived it, maybe is not a guarantee or a solution to all the problems we may have, and that in the long run, as was mentioned previously, it's in the end it's up to us to make sure that our institutions are functional and that independence and free speech are successful.
Well, this is something that comes up a lot in conversation, also with the Western Balkan countries who are waiting for accession or applying for accession to the EU. The countries seem to be on their best democratic behavior until they're actually in the club, although that's also, that's a perception. I'm not sure that applies. But it does come up a lot in conversation. Now we have Irena Mariniak back on the screen. Irena, would you care to ask your question?
Hi.
You wanted to address on Malenia.
Yeah, I did. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just really interested in this educational side of things that Anna mentioned. In the recorded conversation. I mean, it does seem key to me, and I was wondering how easy it is at the moment for someone like you, Anna, or for anyone to walk into a school and try and do a session on freedom of expression. Because, I mean, if it were possible to do this, this would obviously have a huge impact and would have a sort of further effect on higher education and so on and so on.
Thank you. Well, there are a lot of theatre and education programs because this would fall under that category. And there are actually two very successful over 20-year-old theatre and education groups. And recently there has been an immense amount of funding for theatre and education. In fact, I don't think any other theatre activity has been funded that well in the past 10 years or so. So that, and of course there are some companies which only do that, but then again, every theatre has a theatre and education program. If I want to be a little cynical, I could say in some cases maybe really just because that's where the money is, but mostly they are really good programs. And these programs are very comprehensive. There are many forms, and some forms include going to the school. Other forms include the theatre, the school groups going to the theatre. And it's usually not, I'm sorry, I forget how exactly you formulated it. It's not a session. It's not a session on freedom of speech. It's much rather, either it can be a full play where you do this stop and go thing. I don't know if you are familiar with it, but that, you have the show and then you stop it at a certain point and you ask the students to react or to jump in instead of one of the performers and act out what they think they should do or different options that they could do. that's a very exciting genre, and it takes a lot of preparation, but it's very rewarding and infinitely complex. But even when going to the schools, there are very carefully designed workshops, so it's not just maybe it's a session, you're right, maybe that's the right word too, but it's never like a speech or just a talk or a discussion, but it uses all the theatre forms. Now this is
Could I put the same question to Boris? How possible would it be in Slovenia to open up a question, to open up a discussion on freedom of expression in a school?
Can we just use Zoom next time? We just please, and it's so easy to use and doesn't have.
Yes, Boris doesn't see. Yeah.
Please, Zoom. All right, so it's possible. There is funding for it. Obviously, with the COVID situation, none of this is happening. Even when schools are still open, to get an entirely new group of people in there is a very bad idea. So it's fine. It's very correct, actually, that they won't let these acting groups or theatres in. So this COVID has caused this. You can discuss openly. It will depend on the school. It will depend on the teacher. But there is a lot of that going on, and there are huge differences. There are very enlightened liberal schools, which would give you a lot of space and a lot of opportunities, and who would bring masses of pupils or students to your shows. And then there are others who might denounce you, which won't lead anywhere. But, so there is this other extreme as well. But I would say that option for now is a significant one. And once we survive this terrible pandemic, I think that will keep being one of our key tools. So yes, thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, and I was also thrown out of the room. From other experiences. For Simon Garnett to join us to ask his question. He's here with us now. Hi, Simon.
Hi, can you hear me? You can. Yeah, so this is a question mainly for Andras and Luca. You talked a lot about the objectivity issue. So, and particularly Andras, how your neutrality. The neutrality was a way to sort of almost protect yourselves. It was a way of justifying your existence and keeping the authorities at a distance. And then I think you hinted towards the end that now you've changed with Telex to a subscription model, that this principle might not be sustainable. And my question is really, and this is really to both of you, is are you finding that once one enters a kind of subscription type of a system or a model of, then does one's approach to the question of political neutrality, i.e., this journalistic kind of standard, does that change at all, or are you finding the opposite, that people are coming to you and subscribing precisely because they aren't getting this kind of neutral coverage anywhere else?
Yes. Thank you for the question, and maybe I wasn't clear enough previously, so I didn't question the role of neutrality, and I didn't think, or I didn't want to say that we have to change this attitude. Political neutrality is very important to be a journalist, and it's very important in Hungary nowadays, especially in these circumstances when all the news or most of the news can be identified as left, as someone who writes from the position of the opposition parties or from the government, and people feel that they don't get the news. They got, political agendas through the news and through articles and videos and so on. And in this situation, political neutrality or to be independent, as I would say, is extremely important, and that gives us or credit or credibility. So I think that could be our strength or value for our readers, that okay, they know these are the publications, these are the media of the opposition, these are the media of the government, these are this big and this small, but whatever. And there's quite a big need for a neutral or an independent publication. Well, it's just a side note that to be neutral politically, it doesn't mean that you don't have your values that you are stand for. So I wouldn't say we are neutral like, in the science should be. So, for example, we believe, in human rights, or we believe freedom of speech, we believe in democracy, and a lot of things that are values, and we are very transparent on those. But we don't want to, be a mouthpiece of any political organization or political side. And we believe that to be neutral and to be independent is extremely important for Telex, for our new publication.
Yes, as András indicated, the first part of this debate is about what it really means to be neutral, you now have people that believe that the earth is flat, that, the Holocaust is a made-up thing, and, and you have political currents that represent these opinions. And now, do you want to be neutral in the debate about whether the Holocaust is made up, Because some will say, well, if you don't give equal space to both sides of the debate or whatever, you're not neutral, you're, biased, and that all of that. Plus, I would, say that speaking for Slovakia, currently the former police president is in jail. The former special prosecutor, whose role it was to, prosecute corruption, is in jail. Deputy justice minister or whatever is in jail, and all of them are there for a reason, And previously, when the media was questioning their steps or whatever, they were exactly saying, well, but you're not being neutral, you're not giving us a fair chance or whatever. And time has shown that maybe there was a reason why they were not given that chance, or from a certain point they were being, consistently questioned and not being treated completely neutrally. So firstly, it's a very tough debate about what it is, what it means being neutral. It's a tough debate even globally. If you see how much space all the hoaxes and all of that gets globally, I think that there is now a big debate going on globally about whether you should really give all sides a fair hearing and present everything neutrally. Because obviously it seems to be leading to chaos in very many instances, and especially in the context of what we could still call not fully democratic countries or not fully westernized. It gets even much more complicated. So that's like the first tough part of whatever you're asking. The second, but on top of that, I would say that what subscription does, it rewards quality, at least from what we found. I mean, really, it's the exact opposite of what clickbait does. I mean, because you're not rewarded, you're not motivated to do something that satisfies a quick urge or you know, but really you have to come up with a product that sells in the end. So most of our subscribers are generated by hitting a hard paywall and just wanting to finish the article, and that only happens with articles that bring high added value. So we really keep very detailed statistics on our conversions and everything, and mostly there are exceptions, but generally speaking, the same articles that an independent panel of journalistic experts would say bring the highest added value are the ones that sell the best and have the biggest commercial. So in that respect, the subscription model is a force for the improvement of quality of journalism, I would say. I understand it doesn't completely answer the question of neutrality, maybe, but in some ways it does.
Perhaps it's better to frame it not as neutrality, because I completely grasp your argument. It makes total sense, perhaps, but in terms of plurality and whether you know, whether when one moves to a subscription model, one has a set of, shall we say, you know, has an audience that is there in order to read and hear about the kind of things that they want to hear. So I think this is a problem, or not, it might not be a problem, but it's certainly a fact or a phenomenon that we see, you know, across the board, when you know, the advertising model moves perhaps towards a more kind of sort of a donor-based model.
I think, just if I can add very quickly, I think the situation is much different in small countries that do not operate on a global scale. Again, for large English-speaking media that operate on big markets such as the U.S. market or the British market, obviously you're going to see, you know, a huge degree of differentiation between the various media. I mean, you have a medium for the conservative reader, for the liberal reader, or whatever, and the divide between the values and opinions of those readers can get pretty extreme. But again, Slovakia is a country of 5 million, so if you want to survive, you can't really just focus on a very niche group, because you're not going to survive. And overall, the market is not strong enough to allow that sort of differentiation as in the US. You know, it works in a completely different way with small countries that have, you know, again, a very limited number of speakers of that language in which you're, you know, doing your journalism. So I think it's not quite the same situation here as you would see in the English-speaking world, and especially in the big countries.
Thanks very much for your answers. They were very interesting.
Thanks. So this has been Simon Garnett, Senior Editor of Eurozine, posing the question, and you heard Irena Mariniak before him, who is our contributing editor. And now let's move on to YouTube comments for the remaining few minutes. 009QWE1 asks, András, when you index writers left the premises, what documents did you grab on the way out?
What documents?
Yes. I mean, I'm assuming you were smart enough to bring a souvenir.
I'm so souvenirs? Well,
I don't know.
Well, I grabbed my notes that were valuable for me, and my office stuff. Well, wish I could say anything interesting, but well, you know, we left the office quite in a depressed mood, so basically we didn't really think about bringing, you know, like memories or memorable things with us, especially because we didn't know what we will do. So there was no plan in our minds that we will do a new medium, or we will work together in the near future. So basically, our departure or from the office was quite a sad process, and we didn't really think about the near future that is quite positive from that perspective, that we have a medium when we can work now and so on. But we left quite a lot of things there. So our office actually looked like a museum of things. Every journalist always gathered things and brought to the office, and from the life vest from the Mediterranean until secret documents from the communist era and so on. These were all in piles in the editorial room, and I guess most of those been left there.
Sure.
If you're interested, it's such an anecdotic thing that I can add something like that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, there's no juicy thing like the hot water bottles or something. I keep a lot of crazy things at the office, but whatever. A pair of slippers or something of the like. So another question, a lot of people ask whether this part is live. It is live. That's why it's such a horrible quality. And that's exactly why we pre-recorded most of the discussion, so that you don't have to suffer through all the, are you here? Am I muted? All of these questions. So that's a huge part there. And then Reka Sabo is writing, I believe she's writing from England, that I would be interested about the political situation in Slovenia and in Slovakia regarding free journalism. I think you both have mentioned details about these, and we have also included further reads down in the description of the live stream, specifically for this reason. Lukáš included a link about a report from the region in terms of media oppression. However, Boris has signaled that he would be happy to answer this. Boris, would you take it away?
Yes, if you can hear me, is it okay now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, you can, right. Well, I would say the following. This is the third mandate of Janez Janša. Namely, Janša succeeded in becoming prime minister in March this year. And I would say that in his last 16 years, he politically took over many media for at least some short period, then setting up his loyal editors and journalists, for example, in the biggest daily Delo here in Slovenia, then in Daily Večer, then Primorske Novice, then in National Public Broadcaster as well, then in Slovenian Press Agency. And then he started running 2 free newspapers, but for the last 5 years, he's promoting his own media, published or being supplied by Viktor Orban's friends. So these media are directly financed by Hungarian people, businessmen, and so the situation is that he has received about 2 million euros from Hungary for these media outlets. And what he tries to do right now is, of course, to take over also our public RTV, National Public Broadcaster as well, then Slovenian Press Agency. So he's just trying to repeat this exercise. So we are just in the middle of these procedures, how to replace the members of the supervisory board in the RTV, and his mission is obviously the same all the time. So how to subjugate Slovene media, and this is really depressing, I would say, and very much like the situation in Hungary. So what we are getting is really a kind of urbanization of free press here in Slovenia.
Thanks, Boris. I would say that unless somebody wants to share something further, we could even possibly say that running over half an hour the planned program, we can call it a night. Is there any sort of closing statement that any of you would like to make? Raise a hand if you do. Maybe raise another if you don't.
Anna seems to be wanting to make a statement, but it's
yes?
not happening.
Can you hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
I would love to live in a country where people who break the law end up in prison. So I was very jealous hearing of that, because our country is a country of no consequences, as you know. So they never end in prison. So that's already a great step. Thank you.
And so I can just follow up on that. It's a very new thing for Slovakia, an extremely new thing, and I don't know how long it will last. But our experience is that it can happen very fast. That even things that seemed impossible, then suddenly change from week to week and month to month, and even. I think Central Europe has a very long history of events turning very fast, and I think sometimes it can be even for the better. So even for Hungary, I would be optimistic. I think that there is still a chance that things will turn around, and suddenly, in a few years, everything will be different, and no dictatorship is forever. And I think Central Europe is still a place where democracy has a good chance of going through. So I would like to wish all of you the best, and if we can ever help in any way, we will be more than happy to, and let's hope for the best.
Okay, let's finish on that hopeful note, because I really don't want to lose that. And anyway, thanks everyone for being here with us and taking the time. Thanks to the audience as well, and of course, most importantly, the Eurozine Network members who joined us for this evening. So this has been a discussion with Lukáš Fila from Jelenét N from Slovakia, András Földes from Telex in Hungary, Anna Lengyel of Panodrama in Hungary, and Boris Vezjak from the University of Maribor in Slovenia. Thanks for your attention, and we will be back continuing the conference program in small iterations in February, because apparently there's a lot to talk about media freedom in the region and structurally in general. Thank you so much. Goodbye and good night.
Köszönjük a figyelmet, ez volt az Eurozine idei konferenciájának az előfutára, mert az idei konferencia többi része jövőre van halasztva. Csatlakozzanak hozzánk február 26-án és 27-én is, ahol szintén Budapestről, ugyanezekkel a partnerekkel igen kiterjedt programmal fogunk jelentkezni, elsősorban médiaszabadságról, független újságírásról, kisebbségi reprezentációról, és arról, hogy mit csinál az, aki halálos fenyegetést kap, de mégse akar halálos félelemben élni, miközben a szakmáját gyakorolja. Köszönjük a figyelmet!